This is the Laws and Rules Committee, January 24th, Thursday, 1 o'clock. On the agenda today, I think we're going to revisit the retired status and maybe some inactive status. And I have pasted together the retired status words that we have looked at in the past years. We'll have something to base it on. And I also have some information about inactive status, how we might maybe compare the two. So we may look at the old words for the retired status, and then look at the inactive the way that I've read it. And then if we have any discussion about that, we can, like I said, I've just wrote this down in general. Make sure I'm giving you the right. I just typed this out real quick for our information. Like I say, we had looked at the retired status rule probably over the last year, and in general, you know, at a certain age we were able to apply for the retired status with a statement to verify that, you know, you do not intend to provide accounting work and do not intend to receive any pay for the work that you do. And then, of course, it goes on about how you need to sign if you use the word CPA or PA in your title, and at what age that would be you'd be able to do that. And then I think you would be able to keep your wall certificate status at that point. And that, in general, is our retired. Now, I had looked at some inactive. The last 2 weeks I've gone to the UAA meeting, and the inactive status is how they, I guess, were looking at this. And so you can kind of compare what they thought was inactive to what the retired status was. Like I said, if there's anything you see on there, do we have a question? But I would like to just point out maybe one main change. The inactive status, they don't have an age of 55 or 65 or the tiered status. They just looked at a CPA as active or inactive. And they didn't have the various tiers. It's kind of a little more straightforward with inactive. So, of course, the same requirements would say, you know, as far as the test work, you couldn't do any CPA work as far as the test or tax and sign that. And if you sign anything, you need to put inactive. So I'm just curious what your opinions would be when you read our retired status as compared to inactive. Do you prefer one or the other? Does it matter to us? I know what I have my opinion on that, but do we want to stick with retired status? Do we want to, you know, kind of change it to the words the way the inactive are?
Mark, can you remind me what led to the retired status consideration, if you recall?
I do recall, and what led to the retired status situation is the fact that we have a retired status. We've been using it somewhat illegally, I guess, for the last 10 years, because it was here long before I was. So our purpose was to try to get us into line with what we're already doing. But with the UAA committee recommending use of inactive versus retired, I'm thinking we're not sure we need a retired status, just have an inactive status.
So the reason that we brought it up was because of practice?
Yes, because we are using it right now.
Okay. And this was a proposed rule change that's
yes.
Never been vetted or gone through the process?
It has not gone through the rulemaking process yet.
Okay.
So at this point, just like I said, it's just my opinion, but the inactive status is a little less complicated. There's a little little less steps to it. You're either this or you're this. And the laws apply in certain ways. Now, I'm sure the retired was fine. It's just when I read it, when you take the ages out, the tiered status, and all the other varieties, I think that might be why the UAA has looked at it that way. It was just a little more streamlined than maybe the way the retired status had been presented.
And inactives get to maintain their wall certificates.
You know,
Yes.
So the only real difference, I'm summarizing, but I'm getting
that's what I do.
The only real difference is really, it sounds like the tiering issue, the tiered ages, or
Basically, inactives must renew their license biennially. We have a retired, you voted on a retired over 65 status, in which case they would not have to pay their annual
wouldn't have to
fees,
pay their fee.
biennial fees.
so that is one big difference.
That is one big difference. And my personal recommendation would be to maintain the retired over 65 status, but eliminate the other one and make it inactive.
Yeah, I think those are all my questions. Sorry.
No, I kind of learned. So we would be able to keep the 65 and older. And then, I mean, I'm just curious as to what we would prefer on this. Do we need to change it at all? We can leave it the way it is. We can let inactive stay in some other states. However it goes.
So we are saying if you're inactive, you still have to maintain your license in terms of paying, registering. Is that right?
Yes, you do have to pay the fees.
Is that in this language on this inactive?
It's probably, and like I say, what I wrote down was in general, just to give you an idea of what the wordage, but it would be part of it.
Yes.
It would be part of it.
That was my disconnect.
But this is a current rule.
Yeah.
It's one that the UAA
The inactive.
is the one that is the rule that the UAA is proposing. So we were curious if the UAA is proposing that. Do we need to look at our retired status? We need to. It does keep with the certificate, at least if there is CPAs there that are inactive, they still are under they're under the board. With certificates, you don't have anybody out there just free flying, doing CPA type work. But y'all have any opinion on this at this point?
Bring up a question. If the committee and ultimately the board's overall intention is to go with just the inactive and leave off the retired, as we discussed, the proposed rulemaking for what we talked about before hasn't gone through yet, so there need to be some changes. But if you wanted to just go inactive and then make a little subheading under that rule that says that once a licensee reaches whatever age you think it should be, that they're still in an inactive status, whatever they have to do or don't do, but then maybe after 65 you don't have to pay the fees anymore. I mean, whatever the board thinks that you shouldn't have to do once you get to a certain age, you could add that as a subheading to the inactive.
And I agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, that is your proposal with a slight modification so that people who are older aren't have to pay the
Right.
fees.
So in other words, we're saying you would more or less take inactive status wording and it's at age 65, say, for example, you would say you would be, at this point you're exempt from fees, and would we have retired status then, and inactive, or just retired? Would it go
Just
to
inactive.
Just stay inactive. It's 65, your fees would be exempt.
Now, the fees that we're exempting them from is just 120 every 2 years
Right. If they're inactive, they're already exempt from
from the state.
the professional privilege
Right,
tax.
that's right. Okay.
So you would drop the tax, okay. I understand.
That works.
Yeah.
My only follow-up question would just be conceptually in the retired lingo, it seems like we were saying if you're in good standing to the age of 55, you can start carrying down. And so if you're went inactive in your 20s, let's say, did something else, 40 years later, then and you want to keep it up. 40 years later, you haven't been practicing. Do you still want to be? Is that exemption still want to carry over? I don't see why not. I just want to point that the one thing out. The concept of retired to me seemed like you've had a career and you're getting to the age, and then the benefit is you get to quit paying your registration fees.
Yeah, I think I was trying to think because I thought about that. That thought, the reason that they went from retired to inactive.
Yeah.
I think the UAA looked at the same question. And I think there were so many CPAs that were of a certain age that, in reality, I can't, say when I turn, however old I may be, and I retire, and I'm not in practice anymore. Everybody that I know still, you'll be a CPA till however long. They really don't. So if I'm in a club or if I'm in any other activity, more than likely, if there's an accounting, if there's a financial statement, if there's any compilation or any kind of accounting, they're going to go, hey, you're a CPA, you do. So you never really, I think what they were looking at, you never really retire. You just stop practicing. That's kind of how they, what I mean? So they didn't, and they thought it was good that you could be inactive and still practice because, for example, you sell TV, you can go get a used car and you get your tax return done. So next year, you call your car salesman to get your tax copy. They want to keep it in the profession. I mean, so I think the reason that that would, I don't know, that's probably not explaining.
No, yeah, it's helpful.
But I think that's the reason they were looking at the word change, was causing that. But I see what you mean. You may want to put out the point. Now, like I say, from what I read, as far as the work that you could do, how to sign your name as inactive instead of retired, it'd be the same type of, as far as all the test services, tax returns, any accounting, especially for public accounting firms. But I think all the other standards were similar. So at this point, would we prefer, y'all let me know for maybe using the inactive?
I make a motion that we adopt an active language just modified to exclude. And I'll refer to our attorney over that language to exclude people who are 65 years and older having to pay and annual fees.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'll work on modifying that language this afternoon and try to have something for the full board to look at tomorrow. And I wouldn't normally do it so quickly, but my hope, goal, and intention is if I can get something that passes muster with the full board. Thank you. Just FYI, there's kind of been a new step added to the rulemaking process. It's nothing official per se, but it's added about 2 weeks of turnaround time to the already 50-plus days that it takes to go to the Secretary of State's office. We're supposed to, especially anything that has to do with money, we're supposed to forward it up the chain to the governor's office to look at first, and then it comes back to us, and then the Secretary of State thing starts. So if the board is hoping to have a rulemaking hearing in May to pass this and the other stuff that it's already looked at, then I pretty much have to have it to you guys. So.
Okay. Thank you. Like I say, a lot of these, any help by me is appreciated. So if you hear something you don't agree with or have something add, please go ahead. And then there was a couple other items. There was, I think the AICPA, they had the new financial report framework for SMEs. Of course, that is a non-authoritative at this point. And I think our question would be, how would, as a board, would we view statements for companies more or less that they might not be required to file as a GAAP financial. You may have a variety of other ways that they will be able to report it. So I guess in question, you may have a present value reporting, you may have a fair value reporting, or that type of thing. So it's going to be companies and financials are trying to make it more cost effective for small companies that aren't required. I mean, they can file GAAP, but they're not specifically required to. And it's not authoritative. So how would our state board, I guess the question would be, how do you think as a state board should we view that framework?
Is this going to be considered other comprehensive basis of accounting?
It's going to actually have its own. Like I say, anybody, from what I had read about the framework, they're going to have their own. So say you do a peer review, or if you do or you're doing a test, you're going to have the same standards, but you're going to have a different framework to follow, different financials. You may have a cost, but it's going to be, you're going to have financials in ways that aren't tax, cost, GAAP, accrual. You may have a combination of both, but it's something that's, I don't know, it's not even going to be out till what, May of 13 or April? Completely. May of 13. So it's just, I guess the question would be, it's not authoritative at this point. The AICPA does not have a preference at this, from what, at least what I read. In other words, they don't consider it inferior to GAAP or less inferior to GAAP, I guess, at this point, where they're at. So I guess the question would be, at this point, with our state board, I guess, how would we view a CPA's work and report based on this framework at this point? And I don't know if there's an answer to that, because the reason that I looked at, I thought it'd be kind of hard to look at, is that it's not completed yet.
Yeah,
It's kind of vague at this point. I mean, so I don't know if it's not authoritative. How would we accept that, I guess?
My initial thought, I think that's pretty involved. I'd rather just speak about it.
You have all the thoughts you want to
My
have.
initial thought is that we might be well advised to let this develop a little further before making action.
How active give us anything out of the other comments based on accounting? We accept cash basis, but different forms of money, requirements of money.
I had the initial, when I read, I was kind of like Nick, I said, it's kind of early. I kind of like to wait until May to see that. I mean, they have a list. They have a brief out that goes through the different ways to present financials, but it still was kind of vague. I mean, there's nothing set that says this is the way it's going to be. I would rather defer until a little more information comes out.
I would agree with that approach.
Someone above the board may give us some guidance.
Yes. I know ways I may find some information out. I think I can find some. I can find some information. We have, just as a preference, I think there's some states possibly that are putting their firm permit numbers on their webpage. Is that something that, does that need to be specific? Do we, as I guess a state or state board, does something that we should do? Does the way, if somebody gets on to look up a firm, do they need a number? Do they use a name? Do they need both?
Do we know what states are going to that?
That I did not have a list of. You may. I I had a list of some other items you stated that wasn't on.
This came up because of a question from Maryland. They're looking at it. Mississippi requires this, and they look at it as a consumer protection issue. They think that if the firm's permit number is out there on the web page, then the person looking at the web page knows the firm is properly registered in the state of Mississippi as an accounting firm.
So Mississippi is
It's
the
required.
only state that we know of that requires it.
Mississippi is one I got the most comprehensive answer from.
And what is the consequence of Mississippi if they don't put their permit number on there?
Then they open a complaint.
As a general public person, if I wanted to find out if the firm was permitted, would I go on the website? I mean, would the permit number help me find out more information other than the firm name, or is it just Mississippi thinks if there's a number, we'll feel better?
They feel that if there's a number on there, that it should indicate the firm is properly registered in the state of Mississippi.
So in other words, I'm talking out loud. If I got on the web, say the internet web page, and I want to look up a CPA firm, would I find one there that's not have a firm number, or has not gone through the steps to complete their firm number, or would they not be on the website? You know, would there be anybody, if I went to look on the website and find somebody, would there be firms or companies or on there that did not go through the steps to get a firm? Would you be able to tell? You know, or would they just not be there?
They just wouldn't be there.
They wouldn't be on the website, I don't think.
Right.
I mean, that's the way we're.
Well, now, we're looking, I think we're talking about two separate
Probably
things.
so.
Because we're talking, this is talking about putting it on the company's website
Okay, I got you.
as opposed to,
I got you.
okay.
I was thinking about going, that's going on the website now.
If you look on ours and they're not registered, they are not going to be there.
That's what, that's,
Yeah.
Mark,
Then-
go ahead.
I just don't know.
Is there a, do you know from your conversation with Mississippi, do they think that consumers can maybe more easily see if there have been complaints filed against that firm permit number or something in the past? Is that, do you know, I mean, did your conversations get into that deep?
No.
So it's not necessarily easier to see if there's been some issue with their license in the past or permit in the past?
No. That's not on there at all.
Does Mississippi specify where it has to be in the website? By that I mean a website may have 30 pages in it.
Right. I don't know the answer to that.
I'm speaking out loud here. I'm just, if I'm a member of the public and I'm seeking services, I probably don't know that a firm needs a permit, has a permit number, unless you're doing some public education campaign,
That's true.
or you're a highly educated general person. Having a number on the website or not, I'm not sure what real reassurance that gives for the red tape of what you would have to go through to try to enforce it.
As far as protecting the public, when I read that, I thought, well, how will this help someone that needs some items done? How will this help? I thought, okay, if they know the firm number, maybe is there a way, they're not going to know the firm. They're going to go by name to start on. They're going to go by whatever our names are going to be. So I thought, well, what would the firm number accomplish being? They're going to look everybody up, or they're going to see our website by name to begin with. So I thought, well, what would the firm number? That was my thought. How would that help?
Your point is good. If you're going to require it, in order to help it, you would need to help everybody know where to find it. Would need to be regulated, first page.
It could be like that real fine print on your TV ad, right?
Put it at the bottom.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, one of the values to me seems like if you are a consumer and you want to vet a firm to make sure that they're on the up and up, maybe if you have the number, you can go and see if there's been some type of adverse action taken against them. Maybe. I don't know that you need the number though to do that. I don't know. It seems like the name may be
No, here, all you need is the name.
Sure, right. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm just not sure how great a need, the way it sounds here, how great a need for them would be. I mean, I just have,
Okay.
I mean,
You see it? Is Maryland just asking? Did they just ask?
They are contemplating requiring it, and they were putting out feelers about how many were requiring it.
It's a new idea that someone's come up with that they're trying to evaluate.
Uh-huh.
So we're considering whether we want to be at the forefront of this at this point or not.
And I'm not necessarily in favor of it.
I understand. No,
I think it would be
I just
difficult to
couldn't
enforce.
I just couldn't think of a great reason to have it if everybody.
I think this may be another one of those opportunities where we don't want to be leading edge. I want to see how it works out with some other folks.
Be a guinea pig.
If it's necessary, if you've got a firm that's doing work in multiple states, is it necessary to be permitted in all those states?
That's a mobility question, Henry, and it depends on what that state requires. For example, here in Tennessee, if you had a firm in Kentucky and you were performing services in Tennessee, we would not require you to have a firm permit. But if you were performing services in Florida, you would have to have a firm permit.
But if you had multiple offices in various states, then you would have permits
In each state, yes. Depends on physical location.
So could it turn out to be where you might have a firm that would, you go to their website and they'd have multiple permit numbers on it?
Exactly. That could happen.
I don't know what the benefit is, but that's something that would be.
Right. I'll just,
We'll
it's
defer.
maybe a wait and see.
Yeah.
And as far as, I know we talked about the inactive, and retired licensees. I think maybe, and this is probably something that's connected to our first topic, kind of what activities activities of inactive or retired status CPAs would do. Of course, the obvious ones are, the test, tax return, type of work, that, you can't be paid for any kind of work. But there was I ran into some other, and this just kind of food for thought. Say, we talked about you're inactive. Just for example, you're in some kind of club, and they know you're a CPA for 3 decades. At that point, you need to do financial force. There's all kinds of work activities. And I guess just from what I read, it came down to whether you're being compensated for any of that kind of work. But I was trying to think of a way for, if there's anything maybe, and this may be something that might be part of the statement, just from the inactive, what I had written on this inactive statement is more or less inactive status may not for compensation perform or offer to perform for the public one or more kinds of the following: accounting or auditing, which involves an issuance of reports, which would be all three of them: opinions, review, compile, audit, attest engagement. Financial statements or any consulting engagement that would constitute an attest function, preparation of tax returns, or advice on tax matters. That's kind of a broad, I know that's kind of a broad area, but is there anything, I know when the word audit came up, is there any other, any other activities that might cause any issues or any other kind of, anything you might add to the activities in the statement?
No, this has come up because we have some CPA firms who are hiring inactive licensees to work for them. But since they're not actually signing anything, they think that they can be inactive and they're safe. Now, my position has always been if you're working for an accounting firm, you need to have an active permit.
I think the way I understood it, if you were doing inactive, if you were doing that type of work, you needed to be active. I mean,
That was the way I understand it.
that's the way I understand it. I guess for that question appears, in other words, if you were going to do any kind of test work, tax work, anything with public accounting firm, you would need to have an active license.
I mean, they could do tax work and, well, they're not.
If they're inactive CPAs, I think this board has held that if you're doing the work, you have to have an active, have to have an active license.
All right. Certainly can't do financial statements.
Certainly not.
Anything.
I guess if you were internal, you could be paid for it. Even if you were an internal accountant, could you?
Well, if you're an internal accountant working for a company and
Right.
you're doing their stuff, then you can be inactive.
You can be.
I mean, you can't issue financial statements.
Right.
Is that confusing?
What if you're not signing them or the responsibility lies on the entity and not yourself? Can a CPA firm have non-licensing that assist in audit work or financial statement work, but that would be similar, wouldn't it?
The difference is if you're a non-licensee, you're a non-licensee. We have absolutely no jurisdiction over your activities. If you're an inactive licensee and you're working on that type of documentation, then this board has held in the past that you must have an active license.
Is there any concern that that is creates barriers for CPA or a firm for that matter?
Well, I think I was trying. It may create a barrier. Some of the prior words that I've heard is they're trying. I guess the object in that would be to keep all accounting work being the way the age of a lot of the CPAs now, and keep a lot of the accounting work with accountants, but keep the compensated work with those that are going through all the steps to stay active. I mean, that's how they present it. I know we were hoping it would go back. I can understand you're inactive, you're just trying to do something, you're just trying to help. I mean, you're not, that would be to me the barrier part, which you're actually just trying to assist someone. You're trying to help some of your friends and you're inactive, and it happens to be some work that falls under the activities that you can't do. You're just, I guess I can see that would be a barrier. And I think it's,
One of the real frequent questions we get comes from condo associations. We get retired CPAs who live in the condo and they have to have, some of these procedures done. And another thing that brings up is compensation is they say, you won't have to pay your fee if you will provide the service for it.
yeah,
And compensation,
right.
or like in a school.
Compensation includes bartering, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
this your child
Yeah.
free tuition if you.
That would be, well, in my book, I know that's in, because I see what you mean.
Yeah.
And I know there's probably, I would think there would be a lot of questions from inactive CPAs that have their certificate, wanting to do something involved with this kind of work and they can't do it, and they're complaining, I've kept my certificate with the CPA for so many years, and all I'm trying to do is this little thing for a friend of mine, but I can't do it unless I go do Inactive.
And most of them do not mention any kind of compensation. It's rare.
I'm thinking more along the lines of people doing things under the umbrella of an organization that takes responsibility for it. I think more where I was had a thought.
Right.
Such as an accounting firm.
Right.
I know if you're
I mean, the accounting firm still have to have active licensees with it, huh?
Well, here's this is one example. I tried to find some examples. I was trying to read find one real quick. Say, for example, I provide work to a CPA firm as a contractor. Say that I'm going in that route, and I don't sign any of the CPA firm's documents. I'm not required to obtain an active license. Now this was, from what I'm saying, it says you must complete your CPA and hold an active license even though you're contracting and you don't sign any of the CPAs. Now that is if you're a contractor, you're being paid for it. That's the gig, you know. So when they throw the contractor one in there, but that would mean you're being compensated, and so you would have to be active at that point. Now, let's say non-compensated. I mean, I don't know why you do it non-compensated. I'm just trying to find if there's any.
So I think the answer to your question, if you're doing it even under the umbrella of an accounting agency, you still got to have an active permit. The reason for that is the CPE, to keep you current with what's going on.
What is the business manager for the accounting
Well, you start out, and I'll keep doing my research on it if you have that answer.
If you're the business manager of the accounting firm and all your work is internal, then I would say that yes, you could be an inactive CPA because you're not performing anything for third parties.
I'll say this may or may not help. Just from what I've read, said, say if you're going to work at a bookkeeping firm that provides clients with financial statements, sales tax returns, year-end tax returns, but they don't issue a report, then you're not required. You know, you don't need an inactive. So I mean, if you're going to work internally, like say, you don't issue reports, I mean, you don't need an active license for that kind of work, that type of return. From what I've read, if you do any of that type of work, compensated or not compensated, you need an active license. Okay, the way I've read it.
Mr. Brewer, if I may, with what you just handed me here with the fleshing out of the inactive status, it actually has the potential to address something this board's wrestled with for several years now, which is what's colloquially referred to as the H&R Block question. This second paragraph right here actually seems to, or has the ability to address it if the board likes it enough. But and I'll just read it and then kind of explain what I'm thinking. An individual may engage in such activities, namely the ones that you can't do if you're inactive from the prior paragraph, if not compensated, or if the activity is performed solely for one's employer other than a public accounting firm. That sounds like H&R Block. They're not a public accounting firm. They don't get firm permits. And if the individual does not use the designation CPA in association with his or her name, if it were my text, I would also add they don't display their certificate either. You know, but if that's the language that you want to go with, I think that could cover that question, because you know you're not signing anything, you're not putting CPA on anything, you're not holding out, you're working for an employer that is doesn't have a firm permit, doesn't have any obligations that way. So it has that potential, and that'll be up to the board to decide. But I did want to at least bring it up.
So what issue? What's you said a prior issue?
Well, it's been back and forth. You know, like let's say we've had CPAs before say, hey, I don't really want to go do the whole public accounting, work for a firm thing, but I don't want to be broke either, and I don't know that I want the responsibility of being in-house whatever for a company. I just like to go work at H&R Block and make some cash in tax season, work part-time and not work the rest of the year. And you know, if they're not in any way holding out to the public and don't have their certificate up and their signature with CPA doesn't appear anywhere, then that paragraph could cover it, if that's the board's intention. You know. But if it's not, then that probably merits its own discussion.
Yes, thanks. Any other discussion on this point? Do we need to make a point to talk about the barrier or something at some point? I mean, that will leave a little bit of a barrier. I mean, I guess on some small, or some way it would.
I think the verbiage that's been proposed is adequate to accomplish what I perceive we want to accomplish as a board.
If it's the committee's desire, I'll work on getting some draft language to look at for tomorrow as well, and add that to the 65 and inactive other stuff we were talking about earlier.
That is the topics I had on the agenda. Sometimes I may talk a little long, but hope it's helpful at some point. Is there anything else? Anybody? Comments, corrections? We end this by saying adjourn.
Yes, sir. Adjourned.
Go ahead and say it. Get out of the way.
I like your heading.
This is the licensing committee on January 24th, 2013. We have an agenda with 4 items before us today. So we'll go ahead and start with the first item. It's tab 1 in your notebook. It's review of state-specific ethics course submitted by Vista Education, Inc. And Dr. Riggs has thoroughly reviewed this. And do you have any comments that you want to make about this?
I did look at it again. It came in November right after our last meeting, so I looked at it then, and of course it was sitting on the side during renewal season, as I like to call it. So I did look through it again, and there is only one thing that I would want them to do, and that is they make reference to the 4 hours of ethics with 1 hour state specific. They later on say, and you will have to do 2, but I think we just need to get out there what you need now and forward, because no one's seen this course yet. So there's no sense in talking about history. That's only going to confuse the licensing.
That's a good point. So you can just let them know and they
Yeah.
can make that comment.
If it's accepted in their acceptance letter.
Does anybody have any other thoughts or comments after reviewing this application? Is there a motion to accept and allow them to proceed?
To recommend to the board.
Right, I'm sorry, recommend to the board.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thanks. We'll recommend to the board that they be allowed to the state-specific ethics. Number 2 on our agenda is a request from Stephen B. Swindle to be licensed as a CPA in Tennessee. Dr. Reeves did a background, as you can see, there's a background information letter that's been provided by Mr. Swindle and his application, and then Dr. Riggs did a little timeline. Mr. Swindle has come before the board a couple times. He came before the board, I don't remember the date, but a couple years ago, asking, I guess, for guidance about whether to continue with education. Of course, the board can't comment on whether people should pursue their accounting education. He came back again with an application to sit for the CPA examination, and at that time, the committee recommended and the board approved that he be allowed to go forward with the CPA exam. There's nothing that said that we could prevent somebody from taking the CPA exam. So the board said make it license, with his application to get a license. And as I understand it, he does have a felony. It seemed like he had a felony. He pled guilty to a felony. I was a little confused. I don't know. There's nothing in here about whether it seems like that's still in his record. But, I mean, he's still.
Right, he did answer the question correctly, though, if he's been convicted of a felony in the past 5 years. He has not. He was convicted of a felony prior to the 5 years. So, you know, he's been up above board all the way along the way. It was HUD fraud. Those of you, none of y'all were here when he came to court. He got involved with people. This is the way he explains it, so I'm going to try to explain it. Of course, I'm a Pollyanna, so, you know, you have to take that for what it's worth. Involved with people in purchasing houses, and you did not realize that the houses had to be lived in, that they were not to be rental property. And pled guilty, finished up all this stuff, paid some fines, I forgot how much it was, and paid $5,000, completed 100 hours of community service, and the probation was lifted early. They complied with everything. He complied with the law enforcement people, he's complied with what you all said up to this point.
Is there an objection? I mean, I don't, you know, my personal opinion, he's done what he's made a mistake, he's done what he's supposed to do, and he's answered the form properly. That was my only question. I didn't pick up the dates, but I mean, on the dates, but is there, I mean, why would he not be
Gets back to whether, I think it refers to the moral character in the law. The person is of good moral character, and I don't remember what section of the law it is.
If there's a lack of a history of dishonest or felonious acts.
This is the only act he's ever committed, I guess.
The only one that we know about is.
And the application does have that 5-year. It asks only in the past 5 years. So technically, would he have had to provide this information to us based on the application?
Technically not. I never even looked at it that way. It says within the past 5 years. We had not known about it beforehand.
He would have never known about it.
Just had a check mark on the application.
He would have been approved, and we wouldn't be talking about it, right?
Well, we saw it the last time. He had a bunch of letters of recommendation from, there were a bunch of people in the community just talking about, you know, his contributions and what he had done.
This is not the first time this board has considered cases like this, where a person would be convicted of a crime. They would serve time. They would come out of jail or prison and apply to get their license back and go through the process of whatever they have to do to wrap up the ends to meet the requirements to get their license back. We had a case in Chattanooga 15 years ago, 20 years ago, involving a CPA that was involved in a bank investment, and the board gave him his license back. 10 years later, or so, or 9 years later, after he got out of jail, he ended up getting his license back. He's still practicing in Chattanooga now, as far as I know. I objected quite strenuously at the time that happened with some people I knew on the board, and I still don't really understand why we do that kind of thing. I just, I don't know, it just seems kind of, it just seems like we're hurting the profession when we allow people to come back into the profession after they have been convicted of a major crime of some type. I assume this would be called a major crime, but you know, I don't know. I just had a kind of a block in my mind that I just didn't particularly like that.
I agree with your point, but I guess where I go back and forth when I read this is, you know, believe in forgiveness. I mean, people, if I was held accountable for everything I did in the past, I wouldn't be allowed to do a whole lot. I mean, we all make mistakes. We all.
Some of us don't get caught.
I know, but I mean, I guess my question is had he not been on, if he didn't have to provide this information, like at least that's what my understanding is, are we going to punish him for being more forthcoming with information he didn't really have to provide us? If he could have checked the box, it would have been a standard, you're good to go. And I agree with what you're saying about, protecting the profession, but I mean, I guess for me, it's a fine line between protection of it and also forgiving somebody who seems to be sorry for things that they've done in the past.
I'm there. I'm wrestling with that.
I think the profession, in Tennessee at least, has established how they want to handle this in the future. If we base it on history of what this board's done in the past. And I think we've got a hard time to turn it down. I don't know if we could do that. Consider what we've done, what this board has done. Maybe not us, but the actual boards have done in the past. We may have a pretty hard time to turn it down.
Part of the reason that not having been there for the drafting of the law and rule that applies to this, I'm speculating, but it seems that it was drafted broadly enough to say, okay, you may, as a board, decide not to license for a felony, to give the board enough discretion and latitude to look at these things on a case-by-case basis and look at, how long has it been since this happened? What was it? What was their involvement? And just get down into that as far as you can, and then it's up to each individual board member to make the best decision they can on the information they have, and both their conscience and the best interest of the profession. And however the votes shake out is just however they shake out. But the applicant here is kind of at the mercy of that, but that's also part of the price you pay when you plead guilty to or are convicted of a felony crime. So all that to say, I understand the wrestling, but the hard and fast rules in either direction, whether it be in Dr. Riggs' Pollyanna direction or in no felons at no time ever, probably a little extreme, and just I think everybody's got to look at it and just vote how they vote.
Well, that's a lot of good guidance.
Now I do what I can.
I go back to the question: if he had to check the box, will we even be talking about this? Would be safe to say we would not be?
This may sound bad, but looking at it, the way this is written, the way he explained it himself. Now, if he just said, I swindled $400,000 from my uncle, to me, and this might not be right or wrong, it just appears different to me. When somebody says, I didn't realize the HUD law, to me, how many CPAs know the HUD law? But
Lawyers know the HUD law.
yeah,
I don't.
yeah, but what I mean is, but if yeah, I know, but I'm just kind of talking out loud. But if I'm an accountant and I actually do something that is, like a theft of any kind of funds of any kind, it just appears different to me when I read it. And maybe that was when I read it, I thought, well, he admitted it. It was he didn't know the HUD law. But if it would have said I stole $20,000 from my tax clients, or I did it, just shook me a little different when I read it.
Is that basically what he was charged with violating the waiting period, or whatever it's called for HUD?
He didn't live in the
house.
It's like the fraud in HUD.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I tend to, I guess I've seen this now a couple times with a couple different committees. I tend to, just based on what y'all have all said, I tend to feel inclined to give them a second chance. based on the presentation, based on the fact it was HUD versus embezzlement or something of that nature, I tend to lean towards wanting to give him a second chance. I'm not saying that's always will be the case. I think the facts and circumstances definitely govern. I mean, we're supposed to make a determination. It seems to me like I would not say that he has a history of whatever the right legal standard of moral, good moral, or bad,
Felonious acts.
or hold on,
Did his judgment in this affect anyone else?
good moral character. I think it was just a bad, he got involved in a bad,
So it only
made a bad
affected
decision.
him. It only affected him.
he had a partner,
I mean,
think.
did his partner, I guess his partner just went down with him, I guess, in a way.
I think it explains
Tell me about the partner, I was more worried about him.
I didn't remember.
I just mean, sometimes when if you do something that affects everybody around you, that they don't have any regard
There's no,
for anybody. If somebody doesn't have regard for anybody else around them, to me, it's a lot different than you just goofed up and it affected you, and that's it.
there's no
There's a
indication.
different.
Well, he did have, here it says the real estate agent, he was working with the real estate agent, who should know the HUD law,
Right.
who indicated these houses were for owner occupant.
There's no indication that he hurt the
That's what
public
I mean,
or
right.
hurt the people that were sold these houses or anything like that.
And it's also not required for the committee to do anything other than send it to the board for a
Right.
full vote.
And
To at least give the full board a chance to vote if you guys are not comfortable making
A recommendation.
a recommendation for approval or for denial of it. You
And
can
I-
always send it to the full board and say, look, here's the facts now, let's everybody vote.
I would say if we were going to deny it, that we at least give them a chance to appear and tell a story, because I know from past action, we've invited people before that, and once you hear their story and have the opportunity to ask questions, sometimes that can,
He has been here before.
he has.
He has been, when did he
I
come?
don't think he has.
No,
He
he's
didn't?
no.
He wasn't the one who came?
There was somebody else who
No.
came.
Okay.
That was
You're right.
helpful. It was helpful though.
I mean, I'm sitting squarely on the fence in the middle, and I go back to, though, remember, what we're reading, and our interpretation of what happened is based on his opinion of it, too, though. I mean, apparently he was convicted, if I'm not, or he pled, but I mean, obviously they thought there was enough seriousness to the situation for it to go that far.
Well, he did sign the documents. I mean, he was part of the ploy that appears to be orchestrated by the real estate agent.
Right.
He did the banking expertise.
I guess my thing is, I mean, I don't know if we can ask this or not, but I mean, was the real estate agent charged with anything? I mean, who bears the ultimate responsibility? It's easy for me to say, well, it was his fault when he's not here. That's where I go back to on that. I mean, I guess my interpretation of what happened is based on his, presenting of the facts that he, as the way he sees it.
That's a good point.
Is he currently working for the CPA firm?
Yes,
It's not, he is, right?
he is.
He is.
Is that where he plans to be employed going forward, or will we know that? I guess we will.
I don't know if it would be a bad idea just to have him come and talk about it. I mean, plead the case to us. Again, I'm talking out loud as well, just to talk through it. I mean, what would we get out of him coming here to speak to us and ask questions? We're going to ask questions, and we're going to get basically the same. He's basically done that for us. Hard to say no at first, I guess. I mean, I'm squarely on the fence. I mean, I agree. I feel the responsibility to protect the integrity of our profession, but also I believe in second chances as well for somebody that made a mistake and is sorry for it. Based on what I read, I see that he's sorry, but again, it's hard to say. I'm not questioning him. questioning him.
I mean, I wouldn't, I was asking, can you do my tax return, and I knew he had done that, he wouldn't be the person I would choose to do the tax return. Or, I know that. And I guess maybe his second chance was to being employed with an accounting firm. I mean, it's not like he hasn't got a job, I mean, he may not get his license, and he may work for a CPA firm or something. Maybe that was his change. I mean, maybe. But I wouldn't, if I had a choice, he wouldn't be the person to do the work for me. But that's the only thing.
I go back to is the message we send, do something wrong, wait your 5 years, and then we'll let you back in. Is that the message we want to send? Can we defer to another committee? What other committee is there?
Well, you got to take a look at the fact that the court made the decision to put him on probation instead of actually incarcerating him. So that in itself is, the court had some leniency there too.
What's our policy? If let's say we were to deny this request, what happens then? Does he get no chance to come back another time and revisit, or is it one time and you're done? Or what's our policy?
We don't have a policy in regard to that, Stephen.
So let's say we denied it, he can appeal it, turn around and appeal it right away, I guess.
He could.
I might just mention the case I was talking about a while ago. The guy was in prison for about 5 or 6 years. When he came out, now has his license back. The board made the decision to give him his license back, but this guy certainly deserves to get his license back, or get a license, now that he's passed the exam. Somehow go back and change the history and not have to deal with this problem. I think I'd recommend to the board that we approve him for license.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
Right.
Any opposed?
Unanimous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, but
I did.
you did? You did?
I did. You were not allowed to? Am I allowed
It's a tough
to?
thing. It's a tough
I don't
Yes,
know.
you're allowed.
Okay.
situation.
No, 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 Robert. Mine's in there. Those are the tough ones. Under tab 3, we have a request from Stephen Huffman for extension of a window to complete the CPA exam. It's Mark Huffman. I think it's Mark.
Stephen Mark.
Oh, Stephen Mark, you're right. This candidate, his mother, he was a couple days before he was scheduled to go take his final part. His mother died of a heart attack in front of him, and I think one of his daughter, one of his kids. She died on October 22nd, and then he went and took the VEC exam on October 30th. And so he's asking to be given the opportunity for an extension so that he can retake the VEC and pass. And I think the rule that applies on this is on page 34. You have that. It's 6C. If you go down on page 34 where it's C in parentheses, it says the board may in particular cases extend the term of conditional credit notwithstanding the requirements of these rules upon a showing that the credit was lost by reason of circumstances beyond the candidate's control. I think that's the applicable standard.
WBC, but he lost it. Because it fell outside the 18-month window. Not that he hadn't passed it before, he didn't pass it this time.
What is the what is INIT credit? What is that status thing?
Initial credit?
Initial credit, is that so that means the first time you
Yeah, just,
passed it?
yeah, you took it before, you made 68, and then 79 would be initial.
He has not rescheduled.
No, but he did call the other day after I had put this together, and he wanted to know whether he should start studying or not. And I said I couldn't tell it till Friday, so I'll probably tell him tomorrow.
How long does he want to extend? What's his extension?
He just wants one window, right?
Yeah.
One window.
So he gets one shot at it. If he doesn't pass, then that's it.
I mean, you can structure your recommendation that way.
I mean, based on the rule, this is a pretty circumstances out of his control, and it's pretty significant. I know. If for me, it would significantly impact my ability to focus and all the things, going to a funeral, preparing for a funeral, and it looks like she lived
Couple of
out of
days.
depression. I mean, it would just shake up my world, I guess, big time. That my passing the CPA exam would probably be the last of my focuses. I personally don't have a problem extending it to one period. You get one more try, one more shot at it, and that's that. How would you word that as far as what you get one more try within the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever? I don't know what's a reasonable.
If they come in 3-month segments, so it has to be 3 months, right, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah,
And the window is 3 months.
yeah.
And you can only take it once or that section once in the
You can only take the same section once, as I understand it. You can take all sections once, but you can't repeat a section in the same order.
You just say, we'll give you one, till April 30th, you get one more shot at it, I guess. Whatever y'all can work out the bit, whatever the right.
March. It would be March.
Is it March? I mean, really.
It's January, February, March.
So you only got 2 more months.
Yeah, but that is really enough time to study. I don't know that.
Oh, I never thought it was enough time.
I say you're on to the wrong group.
And overstudy and come out worse, I promise you.
Just being honest. I would recommend, I guess, ask the board, send a recommendation to the board that we grant him an extension until end of March the 31st, and one more try, and after that, then there's no. And is there anything that expires between now and then that would cause him not to?
No, that's why he wants the extension. He wants to hold on to that one that would fall off.
Nothing else falls off. I'm saying if he waits till March, that's the only one that falls off, correct?
That one doesn't fall off. The one that falls off would be
Audit.
audit. It was April 28th, 2011.
Okay. That would be my motion, is recommend the board that we grant him an extension to March the 31st. And after that, that's it.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Our last request is from Lindsay Green for an extension of a window to complete the CPA exam. Hers was the email traffic, and Dr. Rick, you might be able to explain this better, but she had some complaints about the test. When she was taking the test, she complained about the computer freezing up and having trouble accessing different parts of the exam. But Dr. Riggs did contact.
I contacted CPACE, and Alan Cantrell emailed back, said he doesn't necessarily agree with what the response that was sent by the candidate. They couldn't really find find anything wrong, that she accessed it incorrectly. And I have seen responses from CPACE where they say, yes, we back it up, we had problems, it wasn't her fault. So it's not that they are protecting themselves, it's that they couldn't find it.
I was confused. It sounds to me like she was asking, she asked for us to go ahead and say she had all 4 of her parts, or is she asking for an extent? I don't think we can do whatever. Really, what we're trying to
give her passing score, yeah.
Because she's wanting to have.
Y'all could make some extra money on the side if you did that direction.
Yeah.
She just wants the same 3-month extension.
Because she ended up having time left over at the end, but she said she got off because of
It was
the
confusing, yeah.
All right, so, somebody explain the situation again.
Did you take the paper and pencil test?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the computerized deal.
I had to walk in the snow 7
I
miles.
would not do it. Sorry for your shoes. Okay.
Remember 300 club.
Somebody said it used to be 2.5 days, so I got trumped on that.
Well, there have been a lot of changes apparently in the exam in the past few years. They've gone, first of all, to computerized course, and then they've gone to simulation questions. And simulation questions are like, they put you in a real life situation. If then, you know, what would you do? And so there are a lot of decisions that people have to make and take meaningful information that they're given and discard non-meaningful information. I mean, they're given information that is non-appropriate for the situation. They're supposed to discard it. Because that's the way life is, right? I mean, when I bring my shoebox into y'all for my taxes, there's a lot of non-meaningful stuff in there. And she just, it sounds to me like she just wasn't ready. Even in her, I'm talking about her explanation, I'm not talking about CPACE.
But, so then she's claiming that there were technical issues, but CPACE is saying that they checked it and they couldn't replicate what happened.
Yeah, they pretty much keep histories of everything for every candidate.
I guess my concern is this opens Pandora's box in the future. If anyone doesn't have a successful score on the test, they say, well, I had technical issues.
We have seen that before, and if CPACE supported them,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
I'm trying to
They can't replicate it.
There's somebody else that came up this time, about Julie James.
Julie, Mark told me, I'm not sure what the circumstances, that we did have another candidate that we were going to look at, but she lost another score, so the extension wouldn't have done her
But
any good.
CPACE came back and said.
And CPACE
that
said,
there were
yes, we
technical
have.
difficulties.
Yes.
You requesting an 18-month window?
Right.
I was just reading the first page, request for extension of 18 months.
I think she's outside the 18 months. She's not requesting an additional 18.
I've never used the system, but is this any kind of difficulty involved with using this system? I mean, in your opinion? is it
I
easy?
can't tell you. I've looked at other kinds of regulatory exams and even taken some of them just for fun. And there's always training that goes on. And like she said, I've done this before and I didn't have any trouble before.
Right.
Did she notify anyone while she was taking the test of the problem?
Yes, she said she went out and the person told her she still had time left.
I don't remember ever seeing that she went and said, I'm having computer issues, unless I missed that.
This email has some of these parts I tried to walk
I
off.
think she said when she went through the process at the end, it said on page 4 of these emails, it said, after I completed the questionnaire, I exited the program completely by following the steps. When I exited the room to complete the final process of the testing practice, she asked me. No, you're right. She just talked about the program not being closed. I
I
don't
guess
know
if I had a problem with it, raise my hand and say, hey, look, here's what's going on. That's the only.
I took it that she was asking, when I read this, that she was requesting that her FAR credit that she passed in November be reinstated. And with the reinstatement of that, then she wouldn't have lost her RED and therefore would have credit for all 4 sections and would have passed. I was confused about what she was asking for.
I basically was just looking at the window, and
I don't think
I
I don't think we can do what she's asking. If she's asking for that, we can't reinstate something back from November.
the passing score, or you say for FARE or FAR or whatever it is.
Sorry.
Yeah, but those are the passing ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
You gotta capture passing ones in an 18-month window or ask for an extension.
Okay. And passing 75 or better.
75 or better. She is headed for the 300 club, you're right. And hopefully she will pass it. She has worked pretty hard, you can see. Each one of those rows is a test session.
Well, she's only taking one at a time. Instead of all 4.
I don't think we can. I mean, we can't assume that she would have passed the reg section. Is that the one she was taking when she had the computer problems?
Far.
The floor.
The bottom one.
So did
She's
everything
wanting
else.
us. There's a 75 up there in May.
We can't assume the far section that she would have passed that to be able to come back and reinstate the section that truly did expire, regardless.
You know, is that one outside the window?
That's 75.
Yeah. 11:30:10 to 11:30:11 would be 12, and then 6 would be May. 6 would be May 2012, right?
Yeah.
So that's outside the window. Oh, wait.
No,
They're the 70. I get a handle on this every once in a while, and it flies away.
she had through November to get.
Oh, right, because then she didn't take anything else. No, but, no, you're right. Whoever said that she wants to recapture a score, not extend the window.
That's what she says down here.
I did not even catch that. Did you, Mark?
She wants to reinstate her FAR credit. From
Y'all don't have the
November.
authority to do that, do you? Or the whole board? No one has the authority. Sorry about that, folks.
But even if we can't do that, even if the only thing we could do would be give her an extra window, right?
Wait, and it's not going to help her.
It's okay.
Because that gives her from May 11 to May 12 is 12. Plus 6 is November. If you give her till March, she would have to pass. She would lose FAR, and she would have to pass HIT and FAR. And you do, right?
Well, she has an 81.
Well, it is captured in there, isn't it? Is it? No.
Yes.
She's never passed far.
Oh, she did in
November
30th, 2010.
2010.
And that's what she's wanting us to
Okay, lost it.
reinstate.
But we can't, well, I don't.
The only thing I found in here.
So she had already accepted that she had lost it, and then she was, was retaking it again
Yeah.
in November? And then she didn't pass, and that's just a,
Look back and capture it.
can't do
And
that.
I think that's what she did, and that's not the way I read it, because I'm always looking at the extensions, and I guess I just read extension, not recapture. extend it backward.
Or even extend.
We've never, I mean, we get extended.
I don't even think she has a circumstance beyond her control. I mean, just getting back to the basics, because I think since we have had times when CPACE has said, you know, there have been testing issues, it seems like if there really were serious testing issues, there would be a record of it on the computer showing that the computer was freezing and she was having trouble toggling back and forth and all of that.
Any testing agency is very cognizant of monitoring anything that goes wrong for lawsuit, if nothing else. Not to mention not passing.
I give her, I mean, I know how frustrating it is working with computers when you're under time pressure. Things seem longer than they really might be. So luckily, I didn't have to take the bar exam on the computer, or else I probably would have.
The question I would have had is, why wasn't there a raise my hand? I mean, I'm assuming there wasn't, because I don't see it in here. Raise my hand and say, there's a problem. You know, stop.
Yeah.
Here it is. Let's take a look.
Can I change computers? Or
So I understand, she had lost credit for FAR, and she had recognized that, and so she was retaking it again, hoping to pass it so that she wouldn't lose
the
ARA. ARA.
Yeah.
Call it.
No, the reg credit.
Right.
But because she failed the one in November, then she lost that one as well.
Yes.
So she wants, I guess she's asking us to assume that she would have passed had she not had technical difficulties, and then reinstate that credit that expired because she did pass this time. I don't we have the authority.
You said something a minute ago that we may not have authority to do this.
To go backwards. No, you do have authority to extend the window, but to recapture a score that's outside of a window, a big window, because it would be a bit. This would almost be a 12-month extension. If we do what she wants done. I just looked at it as a forward extension. I've never heard anybody ask for a backward.
Well, it makes the numbers work out.
She might make a really good accountant.
I'd recommend to the board that we not approve this. Approve her request.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. No opposed. That concludes the licensing.
Appreciate you telling Phyllis on.
Thank you.
I'm going to give this to you right now.
I know, but you don't want me to say that.
Call the Probable Cause Committee to order. John Royston, Chairman. Mr. Whitaker, would you present your legal report for us, sir?
We'll be glad to. It takes a little less time than we can, do this complaint status report, and I'll address the legal report and the committee can read the legal report.
Okay, Mr. Mills, then, would you like to present your status of open complaints reports?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've got in front of you a year-to-date. Basically consists of the past 4 periods broken out into categories that you notice there on the left. We are, as of January 24th, still at 69 complaints. However, if you'll note, we have 15 that are open. Those are just now going out for response. Those will be headed legal and then investigation. Of course, some of the ones in legal will be going to investigation as well. I think everything else is dropping. You see a little progress there. Any questions? I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions? Statistics? They're working hard to keep the open complaints at a minimum and handle them. Hearing none, we'll approve that report as presented. Mr. Whitaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the committee's information, I already had a copy of the report sent to you for review. There are a total of 26 complaints on this report. Several of the items that are in the dismissal batch, I'd like to bring to your attention, they're all for essentially the same reason. There are some respondents who are either professional privilege tax or CPE complaints that, despite the best efforts of board staff and investigators, we can't find them. Some of them are out of state, some of them very far out of state, and we have neither the authority nor the budget to send anyone to go cross country looking for these folks. And so the thinking forward to allow these complaints to sit on the legal report and frankly gather dust, even if I send them to litigation, it would go through the same the same process of trying to find them, trying to get service, trying to get mail to them, and would do the same stack of nothing that's been accomplished so far. So my recommendation on those cases will be for dismissal of the complaints, but dismissal without prejudice, so that the complaints themselves will go off of the legal report, but there will also be a flag or a notation placed in each licensee's license file, so that if they ever do show back up on the radar and want to reinstate, they'll have, whatever the allegations are, they'll have to deal with them at that point. Whether it's, okay, I'm past due privilege tax for several years, well, okay, you don't get to come to us for reinstatement until you show us a payment plan or something like that. If it's CPE, we need proof of CPE, whatever the case may be. So that's the most reasonable resolution that I could come to. If the committee thinks something different, I'm glad to entertain it. But just wanted those to be of note. And then also the items number 24 and 25, if that looks familiar, because the committee did consider these two complaints last time and debated them at great length, as did the full board. After some lengthy discussions and negotiations with opposing counsel, we were able to come to a suitable counteroffer from respondents' counsel that we still think keeps all of the board's priorities in terms of the resolution of these complaints intact, but it's also something that the respondents themselves can live with. We do already have a tentative agreement in place. If the board approves this counteroffer, the only thing that would be left to do would be to cut a check, sign the paperwork, and then we'd be done. It is of note that the civil penalty that's proposed is $2,000 higher than the board recommended, and there's more CPE involved. The trade-off for that was instead of 2 years of probation, there will be a public reprimand, which will include the distribution of copies of the consent order to the list of persons and entities that have disciplinary interest in the licensee as allowed by the Accountancy Act. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman, for the committee to look at the report, and then I'll take questions.
Okay, thank you. Has everybody had an opportunity, in the fact that we got these ahead of time this time, to read through these? Any questions on any particular cases?
Who would that? You mentioned the disciplinary, it would be distributed to certain people. Who are those? What members of the public is it?
Well, in order to attempt to in order to be consistent about the distribution and not to create any appearance of impropriety or bias, Mr. Crocker came up with a list of people and entities for this distribution. The first one on there would be Christopher Garrett. He's communications liaison with the governor's office. He would get a copy of it anyway because he would get it as part of the disciplinary action report that the department has to put out as it is. The TSCPA, AICPA, IRS, Comptroller's Office, Better Business Bureau, Chamber of Commerce, and there's maybe one other that I can't bring to mind. But that's the list. And Mark, if you have something to add, please do so, but my understanding of that list is that it best encompasses the broadest cross-section of getting notice out to interested parties, to the public, and not only to professional organizations, but also to organizations with whom the consumers and public have frequent interaction. Set.
Yes, that's it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
help me understand that we don't know who this person is now, but we're going to tell the immediate public who he is and what he's done. And at one point in here, I guess if the sanction was against the firm, it would put 40% of their clients, or 40% of their practice in jeopardy.
That's right.
And this, by charging this individual that doesn't have that implication.
That's correct. Because if the disciplinary action is assessed only against the individual licensee who was the partner in this engagement, by so doing, when the firm goes to make application to do government work, for example, and they're asked, has your firm ever or in the last however many years been subject to discipline by any licensing body, they can still answer that question truthfully in the negative, because it was the individual licensee that that was disciplined, not the firm itself.
If he individually couldn't contract, for example, a municipal audit for a contract, he would be excluded.
That would be up to the specific contract by contract, case by case requirements. I can't speak to what those exclusions might be because I just don't know, but it's entirely possible that this individual CPA may have some issues when it comes to governmental or other clients that take issue with that discipline.
But if we're going to announce this disciplinary action to the individuals or the organizations as you outlined, isn't this it would have a negative impact upon, he's a named partner in the firm.
That's correct.
And so it can't help but have significant adverse impact.
It could. I don't know, Mr. Bluffus, if there's any way to really quantify how that would play out or how deep it goes. What I will say, and I think Mark can speak to this as well if I'm off base, but during the course of these negotiations, it was clearly understood that the downside risk for the firm of going to a formal hearing on this matter far outweighed whatever possible negative impact or publicity they might receive from this individual licensee, name partner though he may be, taking the disciplinary hit. Because it's really not close if you compare some large percentage of the firm's business, maybe to the extent you have to get rid of employees, versus some unquantifiable potential negative publicity for the firm.
And they have agreed to this settlement.
They have, and if the board approves it, as I've said to Mr. Royston, it's just a matter of them cutting a check and signing some paperwork, and it'll be done.
What is 40 hours of practice management CPE? What would that entail? What does it do?
Mark, I'm not nearly as familiar with CPE, not being a CPA, so.
That is something that opposing counsel came up with. I'm assuming that has to do with ethics to a certain extent, Bill, making sure this doesn't happen again, practice management, since they had an employee who did this right up their noses, a lot of personnel training, human resources, that kind of thing.
Maybe also some internal controls and other things that they might want to think about implementing if they haven't already, because it's my understanding that some of that's already been done. But if there are more tools out there that can be in the tool belt to keep this from happening again, and I think they want to explore that.
As is usually the case in these, we don't have all the facts because we have to protect.
That's correct.
But then we turn around, and this will be in the newsletter or the annual newsletter.
I'm curious on two parts, or refresh my memory.
Sure.
Was there not, while it was a rogue employee, they pulled the plug and said, here's the thing, there was practice failure of an egregious nature is why we're going to this extent. Is that a fair assumption?
I think that's a factor, but I think it's also a factor that there was some civil litigation involved in this as well. And although the bulk of the jury verdict was frankly not related to the practice failures and the employees' misdeeds, in fact it was for something along the lines of emotional distress or something was the majority of the verdict. And so that I took that into consideration as well, because it would have looked different to me had the verdict come back, okay, you get some small amount of money for your emotional distress, but you have this giant award for, the misdeeds. I mean, the actual damages recovered related to the practice failures and alleged rule violations here was pretty much limited to the interest and penalties that they incurred as a result of the taxes not being filed on time. And I think it's also worth noting that all throughout the interactions with the client that was most affected by this, at every stage it was the firm and this partner who identified what was going on and who went to the client and said, look, here's what we got, here's what we found out, here's what we're willing to do to make it right. And they're still a client of that firm today.
I guess that's why I'm curious why we're going beyond the scope of what we normally do, that we publish. It's in what goes out on the state website, and yet we're going beyond that.
We're not going beyond that, Don. Anytime we have a consent order that's signed, we send it to all those notifications.
We do?
Yes.
Okay,
And
I was not aware of that.
The reason I brought that out on the record in this particular case is frankly for no other reason. The opposing counsel we deal with is very skilled and talented. We do a lot of business on opposite sides of one another, and frankly I brought it up for clarity so that there's no disagreement after the fact once the civil penalty's been paid and the consent order's been signed. Oh well, it wasn't discussed that where this was going or distributed. Well, in this case, yes it was. So just didn't want there to be any misunderstanding about that here.
The CPE, again, this is curiosity. The CPE has got to be approved CPE hours. I mean, I guess my question is, where are you going to find 40 hours of qualified CPE? I mean, if he's agreed to it, I'm not going to debate it, but it's a curiosity question on my part.
There's, small firm practice workshops and all that you get mailings on.
And if they attempted to submit some CPE that was a questionable application, or was just somehow weird or way off the reservation, I think we'd probably bring that up and say, hey, look, this not gonna fly here, not really relevant. And the other point that's different, originally the board had 90 days to give what was 16 hours of CPE to be completed, but now with the board only meeting at the times they do and almost having double the CPE to get done, the time frame has been amended to 180 days to allow not only to get the CPE but not to have to try and get all of it at the rush height of tax season and everything else. But I expect we would have all this stuff before the 180 days anyway, but it gives them a little leeway if they need it.
Okay. Good question, Mr. Bloffus. Anything else?
I got one quick question. This may be a matter of semantics, but the last sentence says that if the respondent agrees to the consent order but doesn't abide by it, then his license can be revoked without hearing.
That's correct.
But wouldn't we also want to be able to bring the firm back in for a formal hearing? Because part of the issue is he's going to take all the blame, so the firm gets off. But if he doesn't do his end of the bargain, don't we need to be able to bring the firm back in for a hearing on the permit?
If that's the board's desire, the report can be so amended. Frankly, it wasn't something that came up in the course of the discussions, but it's a good point. And
What if he dies in the next 6 months?
if he dies in the next 6 months, I think he's square with the house.
No, I think Gabe's point is a very good one.
All right.
So this will go, just for my understanding, the difference between what we originally decided 3 months ago and now is that we've added CPE to it, we've added $2,000 to the fine, but we've taken away it being called what?
We've swapped out probation for a public reprimand.
And that, by public reprimand, then it's going to go to all those people you named, plus it goes to all of our members are in the newsletter.
That's right.
Basically, it's going to go to everybody in our profession that's a CPA for the most part.
For the most part.
But then it doesn't have a negative impact on their ability to contract with government.
That's right. And again, if it were not a situation where this licensee had 30-plus years of practice, no prior complaints, I don't know that I would have entertained any counteroffer of any kind, or if I would have even thought of swapping out the probation for the reprimand. But I think that counts for something. How much the board decides that it does or doesn't is up to you guys. But that's all of it plays into the calculus whenever dealing with these cases.
Further questions regarding that case? Since we're on that case right now, since we need to vote on a recommendation to the board, do I have a motion to either approve the recommendation on this particular case or amend it?
I would ask to amend it to include the language that Gabe pointed out about if he doesn't meet the certain terms that we laid out here, that then the firm we could bring the firm back into it. I'd be surprised if that happens, but.
Do I have a second to that?
Second.
I call for the vote on that particular one. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. Let's just run down them numerically. You want to help with the numbers on this, Chris? The first.
I think number 1 is the only litigation monitoring consent order in the batch, going from number 2 through number 10. Those are recommended letters of warning, starting at number 11 and going until you get to, so 11 through 22, the recommendation will be dismissal, and then 23, 24 and 25, which was the big one that you just voted on, and item 26 all have disciplinary recommendations. So,
Okay. Litigation monitoring, item 1, see if anybody got any problems with that. We can, 2 to 10 on the warnings. I think each of you have read it. Do we have any questions on regarding any of them?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
there will be one amendment to item number 5. Mr. Alexander, when it goes to a vote for the full board, participated in a formal conference in this matter, so he will be recused from voting at the full board stage. And I've already made that change on the computer version of this, but I did want the committee to be aware as well.
thank you. So noted on item 5 with Vic recusing himself from the vote. 11 to 22 are dismissals. Most of them regarding the professional dues, as you mentioned earlier.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of all of the recommendations except 2025, which we've already voted on.
Do I have a second to that?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. And we have, do you want to present this as well? I gave you all, passed out another handout.
I'll be glad to.
Supplemental legal report on formal proceedings. Is it all from Jesse Joseph? I think that lady's yours over there. Okay, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, Jesse Joseph, you've all seen him before. He's our litigating attorney for this program. He had filed 3 formal hearings to be heard at tomorrow's board meeting. Out of those 3, the 2 items on this supplemental legal report have proposed settlements that Mr. Joseph would like to have approved by the board. The reason that this one has a name on it along with the complaint number and docket number is because these matters have already been filed with the Administrative Procedures Division, and those are public records anyway, so the board would inevitably be knowing about this tomorrow as it is. I'll go in reverse order, starting with item number 2, Ernest Choate. This matter was as a result of Mr. Choate being found guilty of criminal conduct and loss of over $500,000 in client funds, and he is currently incarcerated. Mr. Joseph did quite a lot of work in attempting to work with the head jailer, for lack of a better word, at the facility in North Carolina where Mr. Choate is incarcerated, and it was looking like we might not be able to do the formal hearing because the administrator had told us, well, I don't know if I can spare the manpower to have somebody sit with him in a conference room even for an hour for a formal hearing. But through fax and letter correspondence, Mr. Joseph was able to convince Mr. Choate to sign off on a voluntary revocation of his CPA license as a result of his guilty pleas and conduct. So I definitely recommend approval of that in the form of an agreed order. Mr. Joseph will draft it, and once the board has approved this, Mr. Watkins will have to sign it, and then it will be filed with the Administrative Procedures Division. The first matter is Mr. Robert Cruz. Mr. Cruz was originally out of Muscle Shoals, Alabama. He came to our attention for the revocation of his Alabama license due to non-compliance with firm permit requirements, peer review, and some other things. And at the time, the investigation really just looks like Mr. Cruz had a midlife crisis, abandoned his practice, and ran off with a woman. I mean, for lack of a better word, that's really how it went. And so,
I didn't think CPAs knew how to do that.
Well, anytime anybody says you guys are no fun, just remember that.
Remember this guy.
But at any rate,
You said we're no fun.
I didn't. At any rate, Mr. Cruz is now living in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. His domestic matters are behind him, and his hope and intention is to be reinstated to practice here in Tennessee. And he and Mr. Joseph have negotiated an agreement for him to try and do this with the understanding that he left Alabama broke, was even more broke now as a result of his divorce and other things, and now he's got to try to get back to work if he can. He's agreed to pay a civil penalty. The total will be $1,500, civil penalty $1,300, and he's going to pay the hearing costs to reimburse the board for having to file the formal hearing. And whatever steps he's got to take, he's going to have to complete all steps within 180 days to reinstate his license, and he's going to have to do 80 penalty hours of CPE. And if he fails to do so, he's agreed that his license will be revoked if he doesn't do that. And then we will have to do a formal hearing. So, based on the just the entirety of the circumstances, I would recommend approval of both Mr. Choate and Mr. Cruz, and the agreed orders negotiated by Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, good report.
Realistically, if he's that broke, is he gonna be able to come up with that kind of money on the front end to get this thing ball rolling?
You know, Mr. Cruz was a professional for a long time and is trying to be one again. We're going to try and treat him like one and take him at his word. If he says that's what he can do, then that's what he can do. And if he can't, then he shouldn't have proposed it. And if he doesn't comply, then, you know, you got to live with the agreement that you negotiated.
What's his current occupation?
Living on his friend's couch, as far as I understand it. Job hunting, that's his current occupation.
Sad but true. Any further questions? I'd entertain a motion as suggested by Mr. Whitaker to approve both agreements.
There's no penalty associated, there's no penalty associated with the second one, right?
No, it's just a, I mean, it'd be real hard for him to pay a civil penalty on the 10 cents an hour you get washing dishes in the prison kitchen.
I guess I'm just thinking back, because we had this other case that we had a formal hearing on. Where
That's right.
We had a theft of a large sum of money, and we imposed a very severe fine. But that person didn't go to jail, right?
They did not. Not for lack of effort, but for statute of limitations and other legal technicality problems. So the thought being that if this person did have some money stashed away from his misdeeds somewhere, that he would be required to come up off it if he wanted to get back into business, which I don't see it happening. But and the other reason is, as part of his sentence, Mr. Choate is required to pay back $500,000 plus in restitution if he ever gets any money. And I think we would be at the end of a very long line if we got anything at all, but I think it's appropriate for victims of the crime to be first in line for that kind of reimbursement if there's ever any.
Is that different from the last case we had?
Not really. I don't think it is, because I think the circumstances are different. I'm not sure it's an apples to apples comparison. I think the severity of the crimes are similar, but
They basically did the same thing, right? Definitely.
one by Ponzi scheme, one by false tax returns and not paying taxes. I mean, it's different. But
talking about the same thing. What was that formal hearing we had? Levied $125,000 fine.
Right.
that was the
Yeah.
that was Mr. Bell. He was the one that worked with the broker who committed suicide, and they actually stole principal, like client funds. I think, if I'm remembering Mr. Cho's case correctly, wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering. Okay, that sounds more like that.
What,
Do you understand my point?
I do.
I think you're bringing up a good point. I mean,
I don't feel like we're being consistent.
I agree, and going back to what we discussed earlier is let's say, I don't know what his prison sentence is, or let's say it's 10 years from now, he gets out, applies for a license, checks, I haven't, I guess, would be the same application that you check and say, if you're convicted of a felony in the past 5 years, he says no, then he's reinstated as a CPA. I don't know that that's protecting our integrity of our profession. And I would say tackle significant fine.
I think the thought process of doing the $125,000 penalty in the last case was to send the message that this is completely unacceptable in our profession. This is the worst thing you can do, right?
And I
Is violate that client trust. And I guess where I'm heading with this is, yeah, we may be in a long line, but at least we're being consistent case to case. And I'm like you, I'm a realist, I understand that this guy can't pay us unless he pays cigarettes or whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, at least we treated the crimes the same way.
I'm not on this committee, I'm just voicing that.
We've also protected the profession, and the chances of him becoming a CPA again are probably zero, just like.
Well, either way, he's going to have a blemish. From
Well-
ours, he's going to have his license revoked. I mean, that's the problem.
And let me address Mr. Eldridge's point, because part of this voluntary revocation requirement, it's not exactly like the other person where they'd be outside the 5-year mark for this reason, because he would have to prove to us that he's paid that restitution or that he's got the payment arrangement. So he's going to, if he ever did come back to Tennessee and said he wanted his license back, then part of this agreement says that he's got to come up with something to us that shows that he's done what he's supposed to on the restitution end of things. And so that would be the red flag or the notice to the board that, you know, we're dealing with somebody who did have a felony, even if it's outside the 5-year mark and he says no. I mean, this will be in his licensing file. And this is more of a lawyer concern than a board concern. But my other concern is where we are now, we do have a firm agreement to get this case settled and done with. If we for reasons of precedent consistency or whatever, if we tack on such a large penalty in addition to the restitution, this guy could well say, you know what, I'm not going to settle anything, and you guys can't put me through a formal hearing because they don't have anybody to sit with me. And so this thing hangs out there forever and ever and ever. And, you know, maybe when he gets out 3 years from now, you know, we try and do something about
I'm just more concerned from the standpoint, we got a guy out there with $125,000 fine.
Correct.
He can basically state his facts and circumstances were strikingly similar.
Correct.
And in one situation we chose to levy a penalty, and one we did not. And he's obviously, we've already done that proceeding. I understand that it's passed. But from that consistency standpoint, I mean, I understand what you're saying. It'd be nice to clear it off the record.
And
I'd like
can
to
we-
hear everybody else's opinion.
Can we bring this to the board tomorrow when we've got Jesse? Is Jesse going to be here tomorrow?
Probably not. We'll have one more hearing.
Well, I'm just curious if there is an answer, because this is a real valid point that's been raised here about precedents and trying to, and the reason we did it before. And you've got a valid point. You know, Jesse knows,
Facts and circumstances.
on how close the negotiations were, and if we could put a penalty on there that we'll probably never see, but at least we have said, hey, this is what's going to happen in the future.
We're sending a
I think
clear
you got
message.
I think it's a great idea.
And just one more thing for the committee to consider before they vote. I think part of the reason that, and Mr. Joseph can speak for himself, but I think part of the reason that he asked for such a large penalty on the last case, the civil penalty, because that was the limit and the sum total of what we could do. Because Mr. Bell was already beyond the reach of criminal punishment for all of his misdeeds. This person did not. That he's paying the full freight, doing hard time, and he's got a big pile of restitution from his criminal case that this other person didn't have. So I think there's at least an argument to be made that, hey, look, we are being consistent. We send different kinds of severe messages based on the circumstances that you're not going to get away with this and your life's going to be hard.
So basically our penalty is then you must pay all the restitution that's been.
You
signed.
serve your jail time, pay your restitution, and then we'll think
That's our
about it.
penalty. Yeah.
And then we'll think about it. You're still not required to give him his license back.
That is different.
I guess, why are we going to even think about it? Why isn't it revoked without the right of appeal?
Maybe I don't understand the question.
Well, he can, he can come back to the board and apply for reinstatement.
Well, the maximum statutory time frame that the board can affirmatively revoke to somebody and say, no, you absolutely may not even reapply during this time is 5 years. Now, beyond that 5 years, they have the right to reapply, but the board has no obligation whatsoever to reinstate if they have that past history of felonious conduct that the board doesn't think meets the professional standards.
It'll always be tacked on his account, on his file to check and see if he's made good on his that $500,000.
It'll be right there in the order. Copy of the order goes in his licensing file. So, you know, even when Mr. Crocker's off in, you know, sunny wherever he wants to retire, a future executive director, if this guy came back, they'd say, okay, well, this is a nice license reinstatement application. How's your restitution going?
The other question, did the people who were defrauded, did they recover anything from the stockbroker?
I don't know. Mr. Joseph might, but it's been quite some time since I've looked at the details of this case.
Any further discussion? I think I have a motion and a second, and we were in the discussion phase of whether we wanted to recommend the penalty. Basically, you're saying if the board accepts it as it stands, it's a done deal. It's a done deal on both.
That's correct.
And that was your motion, I think. It wasn't, but I know you're good. I'll be glad to make the motion. I would entertain the motion. I thought we had it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I totally messed that order up. Can I ask one last quick question on the first one?
Sure.
In number 5, it says respondent should comply with all statutes and rules governing the practice and shall physically surrender his said license to the executive director immediately after the aforementioned 180-day period if he's not reinstated. I guess just practically, this guy, we've on at least 2 different occasions has changed addresses and not communicated with us, even after we enter into a consent order. And so if we do this and we don't hear from him ever again, are we going to get his license back? So I guess my question is, if we're worried about an expired license that hasn't been renewed for almost 8 years, I guess, should we get the license and hold it until he completes all of it? I don't know if that's even possible. But I mean, if we're worried about him having a license and potentially practicing and disregarding the registration and renewal rules, and maybe the other committee members can chime in, maybe it's not important, I don't know.
No, I think that we try to get license backs periodically, and I think it's just a waste of time. You go out and get another license, copy it on a good copier. I mean, if somebody's going to go to that extent. Most people can't find their license.
That's what I was going to say. Most of these kinds of folks, when we tell them, hey, get back your certificate or do a lost surrender, lost certificate affidavit, I haven't. I mean, Mr. Mill's been here just as long as I have. I hadn't got a single certificate back yet from folks who are in these situations. Now there have been a couple here and there that just wanted to give up their license not as part of a complaint file that still had it, and when they surrender they send it in to Mark. But in terms of these kind of deals, we usually don't get them. If it's the sense of the committee and the full board that we should say, hey, look, get back your certificate because technically it's expired until you're reinstated, and if you can't find it, then do a lost certificate affidavit, and then when he does get reinstated, he can get a new one.
No, it was just a question. I'm just wondering if this is more of a boilerplate provision that you put like you do the settlement agreements, or if this is something that we want to be kind of a hammer in case he does. Because if we want it to be a hammer, I want it to be effective. No reason to put it in there. And I just didn't know if it's just a boilerplate thing or not. I'm just new, so it's just been, I think, for my own edification, I guess.
It's a fair point. I wouldn't say it's something that we do all the time with every circumstance, but Mr. Joseph including it in there, I think it's certainly relevant and arguably belongs in there. So, and I think it's within the board's authority with the law and rules that are in place. So that's something that we would like to add to that particular provision of Mr. Joseph's proposed agreed order. I don't think it'd be a problem.
I'm leaving it to other committee members. I don't necessarily know that we have to. I was just wondering. I'm curious how effective it is to have that hang over someone's head, and maybe it's not.
I don't think it's effective.
Okay.
But do we spend any time or energy other than writing a letter trying to recover licenses?
That's probably
do the investigators go out and knock on somebody's door and say, give me your license? But would you make a special trip to
Alabama?
I need to go.
That'd be a high priority.
It's a beast of Texas.
No. Maybe you're going on your new job. If it's away. There seems to be a track record there. Any further discussion? I think we have a motion, and we have a second motion to approve. Second. All in favor of the motion to approve as presented?
Approving it basically as written.
As written.
To be recommended.
Recommended for approval as full. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously, and we are adjourned.
Opposite your efficient.
You're serving that. It's almost time for you.
We stretched it out by 30.
We're starting the executive committee meeting. I guess the first action item here is the review of the financial information. Mark, do you want to walk us through some of these items here?
Your first sheet is your operating results for the end of November 2012. If you'll notice, our revenues are down slightly. We apparently have a few more licensees who renew in odd-numbered years than do in even-numbered years, and I think that's the difference, because overall we have a large number of licensees total, as you can tell by that state regulatory fee. Now, just to remind you, that state regulatory fee is $5 per active licensee that we pay every year, and that's based on the number of active licensees we had at the end of November. That's $60,145. Salaries are up primarily because we have Mr. Butler with us this year. Other than that, I think everything else is pretty much in line. Our third-party professional...
Mr. Butler, were you with us the entire year? Through 12?
Not the entire fiscal year.
Not the entire fiscal year, okay.
Yes, sir.
Started November 1, 2011.
Okay. Just trying to remember.
But right now, you indicated that I guess this indicates that there's not enough information to know that whether there's going to be a significant variance from the annual budget.
No, sir. I'll be able to tell you more at the May meeting, because by then I should have numbers at least through March, Bill.
I just have a question. The third-party professional and administrative services, that item is not huge dollars, but it's up about 50% from last year. What is that exactly?
That's up, Casey, because that is where they're now putting the credit card fees that we're charged every time that we have a renewal that processes. It's $2 per renewal. That is now being charged to us through third-party professional and administrative services. We recoup that in our revenues. It's a flow-through item. So it comes out of third-party professional and administrative services that had previously been charged to our state professional services.
But are you talking about the 2014 budget, Casey?
No, I was looking at year-to-date,
Okay.
November.
But we should end up with a surplus at the end of the year.
Do we want to, while we're in this mode, go to item on budget for FY14? Since we're already looking at these financial numbers.
Let's see.
Okay. Mark, do you want to walk us through?
All right, you actually have 4 items connected to the budget. The entitled Tennessee State Board of Accountancy F-114 Budget Proposal. That is a summary sheet that gives you the 3 different budget versions, all compared together. This is Mr. Block has put together for us. It gives you the scenario with a $10 biennial reduction and a $20 biennial reduction. Now each of those is supported by I've labeled budgets A, B, and C. The detail, we give a narrative of what is in each item. If you to look at that.
Martin, under salaries for next year.
Yes, sir.
Tell us, Kathy Riggs retires at the end of this month. This just anticipates her replacement at the same compensation along with the 3% adjustment.
Yes, sir, it does. If we can replace her with an ASA 4, it's going to be in a certain range of salary bill, and it's going to be somewhere close to what she's making.
And that 3% was just based upon prior experience for all state employees.
Yes, sir. When the governor prepares his budget, there's usually some type of increase given to the state employees. Last year was 2.6%. So I'm just guessing at freedom. That's the best estimate that I can come up with. There may not be any salary increase for state employees this year. I don't know.
How long will you have it will take to get a replacement for Ms. Riggs?
I've got the freeze waiver memo prepared. I've got to send that up through Assistant Commissioner Giannini. It can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 months.
Who will be covering her duties at this point?
We're going to have to split them up among the current employees.
Could that be done on a permanent basis that way?
I don't think so. There's a lot of what she does that I don't think can be handled full-time by other employees. It's going to take a lot of work on our part to get this covered.
Do people on your staff ever work overtime?
No.
But if they did, would they get compensated for it?
We have to get permissions to work overtime, and if they work overtime, then they have the option of compensation or time off, compensatory time.
What is a normal work week for her? 40 hours?
37 and a half hours.
Basically, except for your compensation and that of the investigators, all the other employees are really set on a state scale.
Yes, sir.
The travel under the 3 scenarios varies significantly. I guess that the scenario C basically is what you would consider a bare bones travel schedule.
Yes, sir. And primarily the difference there, Bill, is in how many board members we allocate to go to certain meetings. For example, in the last travel plan, the one that's $53,400, whenever there was a meeting, I only allowed travel for the ED and 1 board member.
On the
Budget B, the ED and 2 board members then?
Yes, and in budget 3, it's in the first one, it's the ED and 3 board members.
You know, the other big difference there is investigators going from 20,000 down to 12.
Yes, sir.
How do they get their job done by reducing their travel? They do. Assume we've got the people, they've got to spend time investigating. So
It would be tough to do it with that budget, Casey.
can it be done? I mean, is there a savings there that can be realized? Absolutely forced to.
I don't think so. I think this will be tough. Getting that $12,000 budget in there for investigators will be extremely tough.
What percent of the time do the investigators spend out on the road?
The investigators, I'll let you address that.
Well, I got day trips. I got overnight trips.
Now, what percent of the total time?
Say, take a week. Probably be on the road half of that time.
Half your time is spent on the road visiting various firms.
No transit. Or in my case, coming to Nashville.
Do you come to Nashville on board time? On board time? Your time?
I go everywhere on that time, pretty much. I'm salaried. I send it. They pay me to job. I don't get home at 4:30 and work at 8.
So if you're not out doing an investigation, are you here in the office in Nashville?
I'm here or I'm at home. So I do a lot of my report writing at home. But in that case, I don't incur any trouble.
Ray, what's your situation?
I'm probably out 1 to 2 days a week, not counting that. I usually come here at least once a week and I work out of my home.
On this detail schedule that supports the schedule, the amount that's allocated for NASBA meetings ranges from $40,000 to $26,000. And that's under various assumptions. It's primarily depending on how many board members go.
Yes, sir.
And this current year, how many of the board members on to a NASBA?
Ms. Stickle attended
All of them.
all of them.
Right.
And I think Stan has attended. I don't think he went anywhere this year.
I gather that under Budget A, well, let me back up. Of these three scenarios, what is management's recommendation?
Well, management's recommendation would be the first one, Budget A, with no change in revenue.
And so, and that would still generate a $32,000 surplus. And I guess when I look at Budget A versus Budget C, Budget C indicates that in numerous areas, considerable savings could be realized. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I mean, we could realize the savings bill.
And so what is the likelihood under Budget A of the operations coming in with more than a $32,000 surplus?
I think it's very likely, depending on the travel of the board members. If the board members do not travel, then you're going to generate a fairly healthy surplus just based on that alone.
Now, I noticed that in the travel budget for the three alternatives, various numbers are budgeted to go to the NASA meeting in Hawaii.
Yes, sir.
And I think, just as an individual board member, I don't think anybody needs to go to Hawaii. And so I would think that we ought to entail that under any scenario. And but that's just, I mean, more than anything else from a PR standpoint, and considering the history of state board people going to Hawaii, what? Right.
Well, we can certainly take that out.
But it's your recommendation that you and 3 board members go to Hawaii?
I would like to see this board more involved in NASBA activities. So, yes, I mean, I'd much rather send the board members and stay at home myself. I mean, NASBA knows me.
But you basically go to any eligible NASBA meeting you go to?
Yes, sir.
I think the board members need to be involved too, but I don't think you need 3 board members going on a trip like that. I mean, I guess when I looked at this, my thought was you did executive director 1 or at most 2 board members, not only to the Hawaii meeting, but to the other big meeting. We've also got $12,000 allocated for. I had a hard time figuring out one meeting's in Chicago, one's in Hawaii. The cost of those are remarkably different based on where they are. But,
Well, you know, I called and the airfare to Hawaii is like $900 round trip.
okay.
So a $3,000 bill per person for Hawaii is not bad. That's doable.
What about Chicago? It ought to be quite a bit cheaper, I would think.
Chicago is probably somewhat cheaper. I didn't call and check on that.
But I'm open. I mean,
I think the Hawaii trip's a bad idea personally. I don't think anybody will look favorably on that trip. I think Chicago is much more doable with much more limited involvement maybe. So I think I would definitely scrap Hawaii would be my recommendation. And then we can decide on the Chicago trip. What was your recommendation, Casey? You suggested?
I think the annual meeting's important.
Yes.
I think we need somebody there.
Right.
No matter how many. I think 4's too many.
Absolutely.
Bad. I also think that looks bad, but I mean, I would sort of be amenable to the executive director, 1 board member, or even 2 board members. Not. I mean, the cost is not for. I mean, it's not
Right.
extravagant for that kind of trip. But I think overall, the trip to Chicago apparently could be done cheaper than the $12,000 that's down here. I think there's some savings here that they realize that we need to do that. But I'm flexible to try.
What says you? Oh, no, I would object to anybody going to Hawaii.
What about Chicago?
What's in Chicago?
The regional.
You know, and part of the thing is that in looking at the travel, except for Lisa Stickle, not many board members have gone to NASBA meetings in the last couple of years. Is that right?
Well, like I said, Stan has been to several. Vic used to go. Kenneth Kozar went regularly. So there have been board members that have attended in the past. There have been times when we've taken
I actually went to the new
and Mr.
board
Royston.
member orientation.
San Antonio, wasn't it?
No, it was Charleston. I drove down there. That, for seeing how the overall picture of the workshop that you were involved in was real beneficial from a board member standpoint. That was just a regional meeting, it wasn't an annual meeting. It was, you know, a lot of workshops and interactions on how the board works and how it ties with all the other stakeholders. So that was beneficial. I do think we get a handle on it. I benefit personally on what we have on meeting matters.
One possibility is that when does this budget have to be turned in?
Mr. Giannini, can you give us an idea of when we need the budget done for FY14? Before our next meeting.
And honestly, it's my understanding that any travel outside the United States would have to go to the policy. That's just my understanding.
Yeah.
And what's the likelihood of that being approved?
Having not seen a request from the manager, I can't say for certain, but I guess it would.
Yeah. So why ask for a flight? Another big item, big increase is the third-party professional administrative services. And you and I talked about it, and this is, I think, in the explanation that it's up to, well, this budget takes into consideration the implementation of the practice oversight review committee.
Peer review oversight committee. Yes, sir.
Yeah, pardon me, peer review. And we haven't had that for several years, is that right?
We have not had an active one, no. And that's one of my goals this year is to get that committee up and running.
And this committee does what?
It oversights the peer review programs that are being administered throughout the state of Tennessee, principally the one administered by the TSCPA.
So we are concerned that what they do, we need to get confirmation of it, or there might be a concern about the society's program.
Our rules state that we will have an oversight committee that will supervise and oversight what the TSCPA does and any other program that's administered in the state.
And how is their findings communicated to the board?
They should be reporting to the board at least annually. We had a report from Charlie Millsaps 3 years ago, I believe, and that was the last report that's been given.
What happened to the previous committee? Did it just fail to reappoint it, or?
No, we had it reappointed, but the problem was we had a contract that was outstanding. It's 3 members, one from each brand division of the state, and we had one contract that was outstanding. We could not get it back from the contractor, and when we did finally get it back, they were all written for 1 year. We only had 2 months left on the contract, so there's no point even trying to do anything. These new contracts we have had written are for 3-year periods. So once we contract these people, they are good for 36 months.
How do you find out who you want on the committee? I mean, how do you go about that process?
The last time,
Yeah.
we advertised for peer review oversight committee members, and then when we couldn't get anybody from a certain area of the state, I called and begged a couple of people to submit an application.
How do you compensate them?
They're compensated at $150 an hour for their time.
And do they determine that you direct them as to where to review, or is it at their initiative? How do they know what to do?
That is something we've got to work out, because this committee has not functioned like this in the past. In the past, they have actually done peer reviews. This one's not going to be one that does peer reviews. They're going to be an oversight committee. So it's going to be a combination of me working with them, trying to figure out exactly how to do this and why. Excuse me.
But under scenario A, that's a main contributing factor for the $75,000, or it's $45,000 of it.
Yes, it is.
And under budget C, it could be reduced by $30,000 to $45,000. All right. Is scenario C adequate?
I don't know, Bill. Never having been through this process with the peer review oversight committee before, I can't answer that. I can tell you I can hold costs down. We may not get the job done, but I can hold the costs down.
What if we budgeted 45, and if you needed more, you just spend more than 45?
As long as we have money in other line items that I can move around, we're okay.
But haven't we, based upon experience, isn't it highly probable that we're going to still end up with a surplus?
I would say so, especially if we are going to tailor the travel plan a little bit and take some money out of there.
But not just travel, but some of these other categories, the difference between A and C is, well, first of all, I greatly appreciate you giving us the alternatives so that we can better understand what's in the budget. That, you know, some of these drop by 50%. How can you, computer-related items, it's $12,000, but you're saying it could be managed to $6,000?
Well, remember, when I'm doing budget C, I'm trying to come in at the lowest deficit that I can get it down to, and I only have certain discretionary items in here. I mean, salaries are pretty well set. There's not a whole lot I can do there. The travel and the third-party professional administrative services are my biggest items, other than state professional services, and that we really don't have any control over.
I guess, what if we had a budget that said we're going to reduce fees to $50 on an annual basis, use scenario C, and we end up spending more than that, and we end up with a $100,000 deficit, and we still have $700,000 in reserve.
Well, whatever you have in your deficit, you're going to take out of your reserve. You're going to be using your reserves.
But the reserve would drop from 800 to 700.
Yes, sir.
Are we likely to get a budget approved? I mean, against the state that shows that we're budgeting $100,000 deficit.
I doubt it.
So that's the real issue. We need to budget at least to break even to get our budget approved. Okay.
You have to because it's statutory.
Yeah. Let me tell you something else here. I think we're making some good points about the travel and so forth, but you get hung up on this thing. I mean, I look at it, if you look at the salaries and related salary costs, you look at the state professional services that I don't think we have any control over, or I don't understand that we do, and you look at the year-end cost backs, you add those three items up under either one of the three scenarios, and it's close to $900,000 of a $1 million expenditure, and any one of those three scenarios, it's at least 80% of the total, which means you've only got 20% to do something with here. So,
right.
I mean, I think we need to keep that in focus. And
I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily have to have a news cut. I think what I remember the discussion here was rather keep building surpluses, let's budget appropriately, and if that says we could cut news, then that's what we ought to do. So, I mean, to me, I think we ought to try to budget these other items that we do have discretion over at the right level. If we didn't spend money on computer items, we ought to do it. If we need employee training, we ought to do it. You know, the travel thing is a big item in here. This peer review oversight committee is a big item. Those are the two biggies to me that we need to figure out what to do with. What you're telling me, Mark, the peer review oversight committee, we don't really have an option there. It's a required function for us, or
according to our rules. Yes.
So we either change the rules or we do what they say, right?
Yes, sir.
Oversight committee. I mean, I know that you don't quite know exactly what they're going to have to do, but that seems very high as far as the amount of time. That would be 24 hours a month per oversight person.
I think it's a total of $100. I mean, 100 hours per individual per year.
Right. I just can't imagine what they would do for that, but I mean, I guess the first year you have a hard time determining that, but that does seem high based on the oversight procedures that we currently go through, and I would
we have to do it, they don't say how much of it we have to do. So
That's
there's
right.
some discretion there.
Yes.
Okay.
It sounds like we've got to get something decided here.
To recommend the board,
Right.
I guess, tomorrow.
Do we want to go for a fee reduction at all, 55, or just pick that that's in the middle?
I think a fee reduction, without a fee reduction, we're just adding an additional tax on the profession.
Casey, how do you feel about that?
I could go with a $5 reduction, or I could go to leave it the same. I do think we need to change these travel costs.
Right.
The feelings that have been expressed here.
And where did we end up with that? That's, we're definitely next to Hawaii.
Well, that would be a minus $12,000, and I guess I still feel like the board needs to. We are part of this,
Right.
and we need to be involved and active. The question becomes at what level. And I don't think you need 3 members of the board at every meeting. I mean, I think we rotate that over a period of time. It's like Don said, I think there's some benefit to going. I know I served on AICPA council, that a good portion of that. It takes a meeting or two to figure out what's going on, but you got these are this big body, you don't know what to do in those meetings. I mean, they really conduct business, they've got things that are planned, and it's important to get input from the membership. So I think we need involvement. I don't think we need to just cut out board member involvement in advance, but I'm okay if
That
you guys
hasn't
still
been
seem to feel
proposed.
pretty strongly about not going to Hawaii, and so, I yield to feelings on that. But the Chicago trip, we ought to have some people there. I think if you don't go to Hawaii, we ought to have at least an executive director or 2 people, 2 board members with the option to go to Chicago.
Well, one question I have is who on the board is willing to commit to going to any of the meetings?
We don't have a full board here, I don't know.
Well, but that would, based upon, we've gone to one extreme that our former member, Mrs. Stickle, went to all the meetings. And we've had limited attendance on other times. We're sort of budgeting in a vacuum here of not knowing who wants to go, who's available to go. I'm not sure that, Mark, if you didn't go to every NASBA meeting, would the profession in Tennessee suffer?
Not if I didn't go to every meeting, no, Bill.
I guess my overall reaction to this, and again, I appreciate, Mark, you putting together the alternatives, but I think it demonstrates, not just in travel, but in other areas, that scenario A has, it is so comfortable, well, it bears very little, we're going to generate a surplus, and we haven't even recognized that in this budget, in scenario A. But you have $32,000. And I guess more than anything else, that the last couple of years, I've had a problem with our budgeting process, that it is sort of like getting comfortable numbers rather than a tight budget. And I guess from a business standpoint, I would doubt that any firm that's registered in the state of Tennessee or any company that they serve would come up with a budget like this. Knowing that they would probably budget a surplus, but they want to have a profit. And, yeah, I guess I look at this and I think that without a disservice to the profession, the expenses in budget C would be achievable, and I would predict still with a surplus.
With a fee reduction or
With a fee reduction.
to the 50 or the 55?
Well, I'm very easy. I could easily go to the 55 and not the 50. I mean, the problem with the $5, none of our members are going to know whether it was $5 or $10. And but it's a matter of principle that for years we have budgeted and realized significant surpluses only to have it swept by the state. And, so, yeah, I think we're in general agreement that we can certainly manage the travel budget to a far better degree than we have. And
Mark, you want a motion out of this committee to recommend?
I think we need a recommendation to go forward.
I guess I'd like to make a motion here that we adopt column B with one change in there. I would change the third-party professional administrative services, which has got $30,000 budgeted for the PROC.
Yes, sir.
I would reduce that total to 50 for that particular line item. Now, the travel has already been reduced by $14,000 from the detailed travel budget that we've all seen. That would effectively eliminate any budget for the Hawaii trip, $12,000, and it would take $2,000, I would suggest, out of the Chicago trip, where you've got the executive director and 3 board members going. I don't think you need 4 people there. But that basically gets you down to the 64 that's budgeted there. That would give us a little bit more surplus in that column B. I think $10,000 more than what's showing there, which I think is reasonable. I mean, we don't. There's not a lot we can do to influence revenues here, so all we can really influence is these expenses. It's kind of limited to 20% of the expenditures, so we can influence. I would offer that up as a motion that we recommend the board column B, with the one change being that we would the third-party professional administrative services be reduced from 60 to 50.
And travel.
Yeah. Travel's already been,
but the 64,500 for travel does still include Hawaii.
No. I think that would eliminate the Hawaii
Is that
trip at 12. It's part of that. I do not think column C is prudent. I mean, I don't see that. I mean, that, and from what I understand, we couldn't even do it anyway because we would be budgeting a deficit of 26,000.
Schedule B, the 64,500 includes $9,000 for the executive director and 2 board members to go to Hawaii.
I would change that. I would eliminate that.
So reduce it by
and
9.
put it back on the other items that are there.
You would do what?
I would take the 12,000
No,
or
9,000.
the 9,000.
You're going to go from 64.5 down 9,000.
No,
Is that what
no,
you're saying?
I would leave the 64. 65 place. I'm looking at this because there's a difference between A and B.
This is
I think the difference between A and B is one less ordinance for attending.
right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Except I would change that to say we eliminate
That's a zero.
zero for the white trip, which is, and then we reduce the Chicago trip by 2,000. That gets you the $14,000 difference there.
Oh, what he's doing?
So what's the total travel budget?
You're going 14,000 off of. Well,
This is the support for budget fee.
so he's looking at the figure here. So what he's saying is, this is your B. Here's the 9, and then we were gonna. I guess that's been reduced by one person.
Yeah.
So you would pull 9 off the 64.5.
No, I would leave the 65 in place. I would change the components, go back to give the investigators more money to travel, some of the other things. I haven't seen this.
I've got it. I think I know what he's doing.
Yeah, I know what he's doing.
Yeah. But we'll just-
He's reallocating some of that money so the investigators have more of a budget.
Do we know that they need?
From the B budget?
Look at fiscal year 12, with 50,600 actual. If you go to C, you get 53.4, and it's still an increase in budget. Travel. I don't know what actually happened in 12.
This is probably mostly the charge for the state cars, the investigator travel, and overnight,
This is overnight and meals and that type of thing.
and the charge for investigators using between the state cars.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, Mark knows what I'm suggesting doing. I would just put zero in there based on what you guys are saying. And then we'll reallocate the other stuff. I was working.
You're
with this-
reallocating that area.
Yeah, I'm saying that you take this A budget, take that out and make it zero, that's 12,000. Pull 2,000 out of the meeting in Chicago, and the investigators have got money to travel, so
so Casey, I'm not following it totally. So, are you recommending a budget with those adjustments, or?
I'm recommending the B column on your sheet you put together.
And so,
With the one, well, you're going to make more than one change because you're going to reallocate.
so you're really taking and reducing expenses by $10,000?
Just one in.
Nah, what he's going to do is if you take, where's my travel? Is that the travel?
No, that's the third party.
So this is the 64.5. It would come down by 9, but he's saying move that to the investigators line item. Really, that line item didn't change.
So the only change to the B budget, right now, B had regular expenditures of $877,000.
Right, we reduce that by 10, and that
Right.
would be in the line item called third party.
Right. I understand.
Yeah. And the travel would include nothing for the white trips and Mark would reallocate, just reallocation there.
So all you're doing is reducing the 10,000?
Yeah.
Correct.
But that anticipates a dues reduction of $5, and it'll get us very close to a break-even scenario.
All right, do I have a motion? Is that a motion? Do I have a second?
Can't you second the motion?
Can I second? I don't know if I can. I can the chair second the motion?
Yes.
Let me think here.
Motion passes.
I will second it and support Casey's recommendation. And Mark, can you make the adjustments to the budget prior? We have to approve this at the board meeting tomorrow, correct?
Yes. I'll have it ready for you.
Okay. Thank you. I guess the motion carries. Okay. By default. All right, real quick, I'm sorry, Commissioner Jean, I've kept you waiting. I'm glad you're here. More than anything, I wanted to make sure that the board members that were present had an opportunity to know who you were. And we thought maybe there might be a few issues that we could discuss as it relates to maybe sunset and then the evaluation process that Commerce Insurance is doing on our employees. And we had some conversations in our last meeting about C&I potentially helping us on the administrative review and the board doing an evaluation on our executive director from our perspective and y'all doing it from your perspective. And so I know y'all had started that process. I wasn't sure if y'all were finished with that.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. We, as you know, or you may not know, the governor implemented the TEAM Act last year. And part of that is the SMART plans, which basically has every single state employee, whether career service or executive service, which is what I am, who has historically not been evaluated by a superior, right up to the commissioner's office, will now be evaluated through a process by their superiors. The commissioners will be evaluated by the governor. I'll be evaluated by the deputy commissioner. The deputy commissioner will be evaluated by the commissioner. So 4 of my programs, uniquely, the executive directors are appointed by the board rather than by the commissioner or by the governor. That put, and we were the first department to ask big HR, well, what happens? How do we deal with the evaluation of the director who, from an administrative standpoint, by statute, we're required and we're responsible for, but you employ, basically. And you also have very limited knowledge of their day-to-day productivity. So it's a little bit, it was an awkward situation for the department. Certainly, it fell outside of the way that they envisioned the TEAM Act and the SMART plans to work. And so when asked, we were directed by HR and after discussion with the commissioner that the best plan would be, because every evaluation has an evaluator and a reviewer. The reviewer is over the evaluator, and the direct supervisor would do the evaluation, and then the reviewer would review it prior to it being discussed with the staff member. And what we determined the best thing in this case would be for the department to do the evaluation, submit it to the board as the reviewer. The board reviews it, affirms it, or disagrees. Then it can be revisited and adjusted, certainly to reflect the board's will on the evaluation. But that's the way that HR feels that the most fair and most effective process would be.
Where do we stand on that? Has that been done?
Well, we have gone through that. I can tell you that there are going to be nothing to do with the Board of Accountancy, but it was a learning process for the entire department, the entire state government, frankly. I think they have recognized that there were some things that worked good, some things that didn't work so well, and they're going to be improved. It's my understanding that within the next few weeks that we are probably going to get some additional direction. You did not, because of the relationship and the unusual relationship, your director did not get the same exact evaluation that most of the rest of our directors got. However, and we felt like that we should, have this discussion, talk to you about the board. We hope we want to get your buy-in on that, and your advice and your input.
So you're going to prepare an evaluation.
There'll be an annual evaluation and there'll be an interim evaluation. And we would present that to you prior to it being presented to the director.
And so, since this board only meets quarterly, we would not have the opportunity to review that evaluation until May. Is that?
That would be. Now, the next evaluation period would be the interim. Anyway, I don't think from an administrative standpoint that it's important at this point that we go back and retroactively do evaluate. This is more going forward. You guys, I think you all did an evaluation. You've been doing, is that correct? You've been doing an annual evaluation?
There has been an annual evaluation. Back I think the topic that we're discussing today is the process by which that's going to occur. But yes.
So I think, certainly it does not prevent the board from doing any sort of evaluation independent. This is strictly an administration policy that we feel like is beneficial to everybody, to the licensees, to the board, certainly to the department, and to be able to keep you guys, I think, better apprised of the day-to-day.
And I think that would be very, very helpful to the board. And I generally think that the process, what you're proposing is, could be very beneficial. I personally would encourage you to go ahead and do whether it's an interim or annual evaluation, that you go ahead and proceed with it, submit it to the board, and we can decide whether to have a call meeting, conference call.
Will the annual period run from July 1 to June 30, or which one will be the interim evaluation?
If I remember correctly, the annual was done, or the interim was done October 31st. Kimberly, we know, is that correct? October 31st. Annual was June. Sorry. I can't, Right, yeah, but I would like it to coincide with the SMART, with the rest of the plans, and we did it October 31st. So,
We have the
right,
or June 30.
June and October. So, again, the time, the evaluation itself, if we were to do one now and present to you before your May meeting, I think for you as a board to affirm it by June probably may end up taking that long anyway for you guys to have discussion. That's one of the kind of true things about you guys looking forward is that you don't have a lot of deliberation time over something like that. We certainly could.
We could notice a call or something like that, right?
Very much so.
I think it would be helpful for us to back into, figure out, you guys kind of let us know about how much time, and we certainly can try it this year and see if it works. We certainly want to have you submitted in compliance with the OHR's expectation. And again, part of the plan will also need to be approved by you guys. Basically, the SMART plan is a group of objectives. What goals that you have, that we have for the director or for the program that will coincide with the commissioner's SMART goals that coincide with the governor's SMART goals. So it trickles down. And that also, we certainly, as the reviewer, you have a very, very important role in deciding what that plan would look like. We are right now waiting for a little more guidance. So after having, again, having been through it one time, I believe there's been some learning all the way up the ladder, and maybe some positive changes that will be made. The first go round was a little bit generic with the directors. Most of my directors basically had the same plan, the same basic list. Actually, I think Kurt forgot. Actually, we did originally sit down and talk about it.
Yes.
And then it occurred to us that really we felt like probably with the scheme, the way the statutory scheme right now, that we probably, without your approval, we're probably a little bit outside of our authority realm. Hence the question to HR. So it's been a learning experience for everybody. I think we probably concluded that.
So, recap, we're going to proceed with an evaluation submitted to us, and then we'll make a decision whether to do a special meeting between now and May.
I can do an interim evaluation, but I think the one question mark right now for us administratively again is the new direction that we think that I anticipate coming on what the SMART plan should actually look like. We certainly could use the generic SMART plan that we have for this evaluation if you want to do that, but I would very much like to
Wait for the new direction.
collaborate with you once we receive that direction on what that plan should look like. And it's going to be your expectations and your goals and objectives as well as ours. You know, we can kind of, from the administrative side, give you some basic structure to it based on what
You're looking for.
Yeah, but then you guys can kind of customize it to your specs.
Time-wise, how do we do this? Because we're not, I mean, we've got an agenda for tomorrow, and then we don't see each other again until have another meeting for 3 months. I mean,
Yeah, that pesky sunshine.
yeah, I mean, is it gonna work for getting something to you that you can then decide to call a telephone meeting or?
I think so. I mean, I think that would work.
That would, you'd be okay with that by communicating it to the chairman? Yes. And then,
Well, I think we need to know what's on your mind as well as Mark needs to know.
Sure.
I mean, I don't see how better communication both ways here could be better for everybody. Yeah.
And Mark was, when he was constructing the process of different, again, I think a lot of this can be learning on every side of the coin through the first evaluation. So, and then the fact that once we've done that, you guys again, you're in a unique situation, and coupled with the kind of realization by the administration that okay, this wasn't perfect. There's some positive changes that we can make to it to make it better, and to make it have a better impact on you guys and on the programs.
So you'll communicate with me the process, and then we'll call a meeting.
We don't need a motion on that.
I don't think so.
We just move forward, yeah.
Can you
Correct.
probably evaluate through one of your committees? Do you have I don't know about this nature of your standing committees, but you have
It'd probably be the exec committee dealing with those.
Yeah. It is committee, yeah.
So we could do that strictly. I could call a meeting of the executive committee and not bring it forward.
and then you can make a recommendation to the board
That'd be-
on the
yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
If legal counsel says you can.
Yeah, that's right.
Can do it.
The only thing I would say is, if you're gonna do an electronic meeting, I think you're gonna have to have more. So you guys can decide which members, or you got three, Is everybody here on the executive committee?
No, Stan's not
Stan's
here.
not here.
Oh, okay. Well, however many are on the executive committee, plus however many it takes to get to 6, because you're going to let board members, so you need 6 to go forward.
Well, if that's the case, that'd probably bring the whole board. We'll figure that out. If you'll communicate him.
You criticized last time that the executive committee did its standard, did the appraisal, evaluation, and the full board did not have all these.
Have input. And that's a very valid point, and I think that would do the whole board. I think that'd be the best idea.
It's not that much more problem to notice everybody getting done.
And I think, my hope is ultimately that whatever the smart plan for director of the Board of Accounts, Director Crawford, looks like, that it'll fairly mirror the rest of my directors. So I don't, unless you guys decide that you're going to have some unique expectations from that, it's going to be kind of the departmental focus.
And then just in general, sunset, where we stand, do we need to do anything? Do we?
My understanding is you're all good. I think we had a meeting a week ago, 2 weeks ago with Senator Bill, and I think that everything's okay. I think it wasn't us.
They're not going to send us all away.
We're not going to go there. Sorry.
Well, I guess more importantly, if we need to do something, certainly I hope you'd ask, and we're more than willing to help with any of that process. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions for us, Mr. Commissioner? We appreciate you coming.
Appreciate y'all very much.
Thank you.
Let me know if I can do anything for you.
Thank you.
As soon as I get my new direction, I'll get something.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, I'm sorry for the time frame here. So that discusses the bottom two. So on our agenda here, I have that we have reviewed the financial information. I have that we reviewed the travel plan for FY14, the budget for FY14, the evaluation document for the executive director, and obviously Mr. Genie who's left. So that leaves us kind of the one big topic here. Had some commentary on the state-specific ethics presentations, and I've had multiple comments in just different ways, and in some of them in some ways they were about whether the board should be presenting these in direct competition with other providers for a no charge fee. I think it's valid to understand who's presenting these presentations from our side, whether that's the investigators and Mark, or who all's involved with that process. I think it's just a good general topic to discuss whether we can use some electronic means, for example, to offer on a web basis as opposed to us going across the state and spending time, money with our staff, travel money that we've laid out there, for example. Is it more efficient for us to offer something online so that people can come in? I mean, we do a lot of CPE online now. I don't know if that's something we want to pursue. More than anything, I was hoping to have a very good general discussion. I would expect some commentary from the audience perhaps on this. So I think in general, my general thought process is that this board creates the rules. We police the profession. We get to see a lot of the bad side of our profession. And I think we are actually in a very good position to be teaching ethics courses across the state in that realm. I'll take some general commentary on that. Mr. Royce.
Having been on both sides of the fence
Right.
In the past, Mr. Bill came up and did a presentation for 115 people, I guess, for us. We didn't charge anything for it. For the state board, did get that kind of exposure. And to be able to ask the real investigator what's going on out there, and I think is right on. We, like you said, are the providers, we set the rules, and I see this as a service for the state board. If they're going out and doing one for 10 people, I think stretch it. I think you need to get we would probably be more generous than we ought to. And I think it's 10 current guideline.
10's the current guideline.
Moved up from earlier.
Yeah.
You know, we maybe ought to look at that again, but I think if you've got an audience, people for us to be able to explain what the board does and all that is the important thing. We're also providing at no cost the course to the people that are making it.
Right.
Assuming
They can copy our course and basically
we're
present it.
providing that course to the teachers.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
They are qualified teachers.
As long as we approve them to teach the
Exactly.
course.
So, I mean, we're giving back there, so any criticism of us cutting into somebody's budgets, I'd argue with them, but once you got to a threshold, smaller than a wasted. I think we need to bump the threshold. That's my reason.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Well, Mark's come over to our firm, it's been 2-3 years ago, and did a presentation, did a great job, and, we had about 40 professionals in the room. I guess my thought on this thing is, not only are we hearing cases and complaints, trying to enforce things, but to me, this is preventive.
Right.
By going out and, telling groups and getting the message out there, that I think it has value in somebody just because they didn't know,
Right.
we're kind of re-educating, if you will. And a lot of just practitioners were busy all day long, you forget that you took an ethics course many years ago, and that's why I think it's great that we're going out and presenting this course in front of groups. And I think that's part of our mission.
Mr. Butler, are you teaching these courses yet? Not yet.
Oh, I've done a couple of them.
Okay. So you haven't soloed on your own yet on one of these? Is that in the works, or are we trying to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Because my thought too on that process is that geographically then we would be covered across the state. Does that make sense? Because Don's in the east and Mark's in central. And you're in Memphis, obviously, so that would cut down on some of the travel expenses related to this process. Plus, if we raise the limit on the number of people we present to, perhaps that might be something else we want to consider. I'm like you. I mean, I think the exposure piece for us is critical. I think I would like to see it bigger groups. Do we want to pursue any digital delivery of evidence? Or is that just too much? There's too much out there to do
There's
it.
too many other resources.
Well, and you have to develop them too, it takes some time.
Kathy, that's anybody else.
Mr. Chairman, you also got the oversight piece to consider with the digital part of things. You've got people coming in.
Just scrap it.
Yeah, when you screen and approve folks to go teach even the board's course, that
Right.
still maintains the board's duty and responsibility to oversight who actually does this. But you just put it digital and it's just out there in the universe. And
Well, my thought is that one of our people would deliver a video thing to, we do that stuff all the time, I don't know if you do it in the legal side, but we do a lot of online CPE, and there's usually a presenter, and they answer 4 or 5 questions, make sure nobody's asleep, and then keep going, I guess, it's kind of the way
We have chat.
But no, I'm okay with that, yeah, I'm sure. So do we want to address the max limit for presenting on-site?
Trey, it seems to me, and I'm not trying to disagree with you, but it seems to me that you're that the board has got a little bit of a conflict of interest here, because you're setting the rules, you're establishing the agenda, you're licensing people to go out and teach the class, and then at the same time, you're sending the investigators out doing the same thing in competition with those that are charging a fee for it. It just seems like that there's a conflict of interest there between the two things that we're doing. And
Well, I think, to Mr. Royston's point, we develop a curriculum that we will give to anyone to sell and teach. And I think that's...
don't we have to approve them?
We will have to approve the teacher, correct? And we now have, how many people do we have that are going to get?
We did, I don't recall the name. But we've not had many that have asked for approval to teach.
That.
But seems to be that there are a considerable number of options for a practitioner to get this ethics training at no cost. And if somebody chooses to pay for it, that's their
Well,
decision.
and by going to perhaps a number of 20 participants, then those other courses that are offered by other people would then be, a lot of those are online, I would presume.
But does this time that they're spending doing these types of presentation taking away from their investigative duties?
Well, I think to Casey's point that what we're doing is we're educating our profession and we are providing a service to our dues-paying members, and it's a preventative measure so that we're not having to spend time on the back end necessarily with formal hearings. So there would be some, I can't quantify that for you, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend I can, but I think it's important for us, since we are the rule-setting body for the profession, to be out there talking about the issues that affect the profession as it relates to the rules and regulations of this board.
Should that be limited?
Well, that's what we're talking about. When you say limited, to the number of people or to
number of events. In other words, if they're going to take a day out of their schedule to present one of these programs,
that's correct.
Travel there to present the program, travel back, it takes a day away from them. Should we limit the number of days that they can spend doing that?
I don't know if you limit the number of days and the number of people they can present to. And I think if you get to the 20, you'll figure out pretty quick that will limit the number of events.
Henry, I don't think you would have to limit it until it gets to be an issue. I mean, I think this is equally or more important than investigation.
I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just saying if you're doing it free of charge versus charging a fee, pretty soon these guys are going to be the only ones in the state presenting the program.
I disagree. I'll tell you why I disagree with that.
Because the small firms are going to have to go through their chapter or some other method to get the training, but if the large organizations in town, the bigger firms are going to have an advantage of getting this free.
Well, they already have. If you have more than 10 people right now, it's been in existence for a very long time.
Henry, we've done it twice since Mark, and we did
He
it
did
to
it
another
with
source because it was just more economical. And
we don't have to leave the office.
Free's a lot better.
And Mark also does, it's not just investigators, and I believe when Don came up, he had scheduled to do investigations while he was up there and came over and did the course for an hour. So it's not like it's just a special.
Well, and in my mind, what I'm hoping for is that Mr. Butler is up and running on this, and then you've got West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and East Tennessee, to where that travel is limited to that particular zone. Does that make sense?
I mean, I certainly see it's very important that this type of work be done, and you know, who else could do it better than the state board itself?
They would set the rules.
I agree. I don't argue with that. It's just that it seems like that one, we're being unfair to the people that are charging for this service because we're going around doing it for free. Why don't we charge for it?
Okay.
And be on a competitive basis.
I'm not sure we
That's not fair. We're trying to say
anything that results in revenues is gonna have to go through the government sausage making process. If it results in money coming in to, I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, it would have to be talked about in the fiscal part of things, probably be in here in the budget somewhere in a line item,
We'd have to debate to collect it.
Yeah.
and possibly the rulemaking process and other things.
That's nice.
There is one point I'd like to make, Henry, and I don't know if it's even relevant to you, but I would say probably in 90% of the cases, it's just like when I came to Kingsport. I was part of a 2-day celebration of tax. You know, I came to this medal thing. It was the free part that I bet that award from Colorado wasn't free, was it? Oh, it was. So, you know, I don't know if that really matters, but we don't usually go into a freestanding, you know, here's your state ethics. We're usually involved with somebody else, you know, kind of as a sideshow. You can get 8 hours of tax and 2 hours of state specifics. You know, so most of the people attending there, they're paying something to somebody. You know, we just don't feel for it. You know, does that change your thoughts on it at all? I haven't run the numbers to say, you know, absolutely walk in and do this one for free versus being a
Now,
part.
who did you give it for? Who did you give the presentation
But was that, I think we was asking, what was the
group?
conference?
What was the composition of the
We
group?
let
Was,
local practitioners every year, we bring in a speaker from them every year.
There's a group of firms. This is
Small firms that can't,
Does a 2-day seminar or
we do a
whatever.
2-day tax seminar, but
I do
for the small firms that,
for? Instead of your local chapter putting this on, your
we just do it at a break in, we don't make it, matter of fact, of course, I guess, here we'll get our staff educated too, but it's an expensive program, time we bring everything out there. Programs are $2,000.
Well, our chapter in Chattanooga puts those on too, and they do charge for it, for the people who come in to do it, but the speakers generally are not paid. They generally volunteer. A lot of times maybe we pay their travel expenses, that type of thing, but I don't think we give them an hourly fee or anything for programs.
Well, let's hear what Brad has to say. So he can speak from a society standpoint.
What I'm about to say isn't good for my business because we quite frankly sell a lot of this online.
Right.
Any licensee in the state, go on our website, click a button. I think they pay $45 if I'm not mistaken. And they get the 2-hour ethics and they never leave their office.
It's a convenience factor.
It's convenient, it's consistent message, it's the same message regardless of who goes on 24/7. You don't wake up at 3 in the morning and knock it out before you go to work, you can do that. But it's a commodity. There's clearly value in this Board of Accountancy outreaching to the practitioner community, getting out there, meeting with conferences, meeting with conventions, chapters, firms, others, to let them know what you're doing and what they need to be thinking about as their practice. There's clear value in that. When Mark and representatives of this board go out and meet with practitioners, it enhances, I think, the quality of the practice and protects the public's interest. But this 2-hour is supposed to be an ethics presentation. It seems to me that the state, Mark, or whomever, would do one take, put it online, have every licensee be required to go on there for free when they're renewing their license. They're going to get an automatic certificate saying I've completed the process. They could even, I do it every year as a lobbyist. I have to go on for the state registry of finance and election commission. I have to go on. It is a neat little program. You go, you read a case study, you have to answer it correctly. If you answer it wrong, it says you were wrong, but here's the right answer and here's why. The learning experience, there's no failing the class, but it's a heck of a neat little learning experience. It takes me about 50 minutes to knock it out. And when I finish, it says you successfully completed. I pop out a little certificate, and I mail it in with my fees, and I renew my license. This is a licensure renewal piece, and I think whether we offer it online or whether we hire other people to come offer it in firms or conferences, or whether Mark goes out and gives it, or whether Don goes and says something a little different. Everybody says something a little bit different. We've got guidelines on what the objective should be. But if it's done once, and it's done by your best person, whoever that is, market to it, we've got a studio out in our office, we can set it up where the state does a great job with this somewhere, because I know I take that, and it's really neat, it's free. He would cut us out of a good bit of business, to be quite honest, and what I'm saying is, but there's clear value in the board going out. I'm confident in going to our conventions, and going to our chapter meetings, going into firms, and explaining the process of regulating the CPA profession in Tennessee is going to make everyone practice better. It's going to enhance the public's interest. But this ethics is supposed to be ethics. It's not supposed to be what's in DCA 62.105. That's more of a law and rules class. It's really not, what's right, what's wrong. Do some case studies. It creates something that is a true learning experience from that standpoint. But it can be done online. It can be done free. It can be very consistent because every licensee in the state would have to get the exact same thing, and it can be produced by the state and put on the State Board of Accountancy's website and be a requirement before they renew, or maybe however you wanted to make them, maybe for a date or however you want to stagger them. But it's a simple process. It would be the same thing. Everybody's hearing the same thing. You're not hearing something different. Doug Moore goes out and gets one talk, and Jim Myers goes and gets another one, Doc gets another one, and Mark gets another one. Anybody, Perry Moore does a lot of it out of lunch, all approved. I mean, they're good programs, but they're all different. And it can be done so conveniently online. It's only 2 hours. You're talking about 2 50-minute segments. And there's technology that allow you to pop out a certificate or even email it into the board somehow, some way. You would think that could be done consistently, easily, without eliminating the need for outreach and meeting with firms and visiting. I know our convention needs to have a representative board there. Our people need to understand the licensing, need to understand what the board's doing.
Which we did last year, just for the record.
There's just a lot of different versions of this program out there. It's more of a law and rules. Why do we even call it ethics? There may be a little ethics blended in there, but mostly it's what can you do? What do you need to renew your license? Here's what the Board of Accountancy does. Make sure what the law is established. You need to go to privacy. Even some licensees don't understand that there's a law and there's a board and there's certain
You're right. It's never been
and it's a
ethics.
law and rules course. It's really not ethics, but to create a good ethics course, it contains some of the basics of the laws and rules that may be blended in with that ethics. It can be easily done. It provide consistency, but still do all the outreach and what we need. I wouldn't want this all to happen because we're going to all this cool, all that stuff. But it's available free. We offer free in every chapter across our state. We've got 8 chapters, and just some of the best attended meetings. The national chapter does their free ethics twice a year. They may pick up 400 or 500 licensees, but you've got, 8 or 10 or 12,000 are needed. And if they all go online, get the same message, and somehow streamline, it's just a matter of reducing it. Somebody speaking into a camera, you can do a PowerPoint. We've got a lot on. We must have how many online courses we have right now on our website. We produced ourselves hundreds of them on there, and they're all 1 and 2 4-hour segments, but and they're available 24/7. A member can take them whenever. And some of them we offer for free for informational, but we're paying for production costs. We tend to try to recoup some of that cost. That's just an idea. It's a good.
And other states do that. That's how,
Well, the
I know
state
in
of
Florida,
Tennessee
that's how
does
they do
that.
it.
They do it for other licenses.
I think it's pigeonhole what we think about how we present the course content, who's presenting it, what's the limitation of the numbers to present live. I think the really only change right now, barring that commentary, is the limitations on the top end of, I say top end, the lower end of what we should be doing for how many people should we get in this. Should that limit be raised from 10 to a third of the number?
I mean, it's a convincing guy. He convinced me.
40 hours of CPE. This should be a licensure renewal purpose. I mean, when you renew your license, you gotta get this ethics requirement, whether you want call it continuing education or not, it's a requirement for
Is
government.
that something we want to get the board tomorrow?
I think it's good for a general
Maybe
conversation.
Mark,
Sure.
build a fence around this, and what does it cost, and how do you do it? Is it something we can do? Is there any, a lot of questions, is there any legal ramifications for us doing something online like that? Those kind of things, and then we just need
Yes.
to.
That's going to take some research, Casey, but we can get that together.
Yeah.
Let me get with our IT people.
Casey, you've already got other departments doing it. Well, it'll be legal for this part.
All right, let's move on. I think tomorrow we'll have a general discussion, if we can, on that. And then, Mark, do you want to select committee for hiring of PROC members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the rules state that we must have a committee to hire these PROC members. And the committee must be composed of the executive director, 2 board members, and 1 former PROC member. Now, technically, we've had a PROC, David Curbo, Tracy Thomas, and Charlie Millsaps were all on that committee. Prior to that, we had Jim Mickey served on the committee, and Jim's local. So I was hoping that I could get approval to ask Jim to serve on this committee since he is here in Nashville, and then have the board appoint 2 members to work on this committee, and we can get this done quickly. So we can get the advertisements out there and get it going.
Any objections? Okay.
We'll just do that tomorrow.
I guess we'll just authorize that tomorrow.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure you'll still want the hotel.
Casey's supporting them all.
Okay, and NASBA Vice Chair endorsements.
You've got recommendations for 3 people for NASBA Vice Chair: Ken Odom, Walter Davenport, and Janice Gray. Ken Odom is the one that comes to mind. Ken has met with this board before. I think he'd make an excellent vice chair.
Freshman memory, have we endorsed these things? I mean, I remember something coming out before, we kind of put the
Passed on
timeline.
it. Yeah, passed on it before. This board has in the past endorsed. You don't have to, but they've asked for your endorsement. Each one of them has.
How can you do that just based on a resume?
We only have one that has history. Last time we did, we had some history. We actually spoke of language.
Carlos Johnson, right?
Carlos, yes.
That's right.
So we had a history with him, and we're happy with it. We like it, standpoint, because we got, how much history we've got.
Odom has been here.
I misspoke. That was Carlos Johnson who's been here. Yeah, so.
Huh.
Has he? Yeah.
75.
Sorry.
Is there a particular thought that you have regarding this issue, or?
Well, if we're going to endorse one, I would suggest Mr. Odom. I think he has the qualifications necessary to lead NASBA. He certainly has the personality for it.
How important is it for us to endorse one of these? I mean, it really doesn't matter, right? I mean,
No, it is simply a board's choice. And if you're not comfortable doing that, then that's fine.
and we've got 3 requests right now for the same position.
Yes.
And I've always been the one that hedge my bets, because I don't know who's going to I don't know. How do y'all feel about it?
If it doesn't make, I don't know that I'm informed enough to choose one. And particularly if it doesn't make any difference in the end result.
Well, I think it does make a difference in the end result. I think
You
that,
could have an impact, I guess, on
yeah,
That they can say all these states that
the endorse me,
yes.
kind of a seal of approval type thing, I guess, so. Which makes it even scarier if you don't know, I
Do
guess.
you know either of the other individuals, Mark, Drew?
I do know, I know all three of them,
you would recommend owning.
but
over
Ken is
the
the one
other?
that rises to the top, yes, in my opinion.
I feel like I don't have enough information to
Yeah, I'm
really
with you on that.
say.
This isn't a negative impact on us to not endorse, it's strictly just saying we're information.
No.
I feel the rest of the board members will not know these individuals as well.
I know that Troy knows Ken.
Okay.
I think he's the only one he knows.
We lay it out there, I mean, we don't have to go for a recommendation.
Right,
Just
right,
let
just
them-
discuss.
Yeah, just discuss it tomorrow.
I'm fine with that. Are you okay
That's
with
fine.
that?
Yeah, we can talk for- say something tomorrow.
He's used up all his speaking time there. Okay, so we'll table that conversation for tomorrow. And with that, we're adjourned.
Very good.
Thank you.